Welcome, everyone. It is 5:15 on Monday, December 13th of 2021, and the Carroll City Council meeting shall now commence. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda this evening is the swearing in of the newly elected officials, and I believe Gina Bading is present. And when you're ready to proceed, who would you like to call up first?
We'll have Mark Beardmore first.
Okay.
I heard my name.
That's you. All right, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Mark Beardmore,
I, Mark Beardmore,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and that I will faithfully and impartially,
and I will faithfully and impartially,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
discharge all the duties of the office of mayor,
discharge my office,
all the duties
of the office of mayor,
that you're fine, in the city of Carroll, Iowa,
and the city of Carroll, Iowa,
as now or hereafter required by law.
is now or thereafter required by law.
Congratulations. All right, and then we'll have Tom Bornero come forward next.
I was kind of hoping it would last so I could hear it more than once.
All right, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. The first part's easy. I, Tom Bornero,
I, Tom Bordner,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and that I will faithfully and impartially,
that I will faithfully and impartially,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my abilities,
discharge all the duties of the office of, go ahead.
discharge the, let's do that again.
Discharge all the duties of the office
Discharge all the duties of the office
of First Ward Council Member
of First Ward Council Member
in the city of Carroll, Iowa,
in the city of Carroll, Iowa,
as now or hereafter required by law.
as now or hereafter required by law.
Congratulations. All right, and then we'll have Kyle Bauer come forward next. All right, I'll have you raise your right hand, please, and repeat after me. I, Kyle Bauer,
I, Kyle Bauer,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and that I will faithfully and impartially,
that I will faithfully and impartially,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
discharge all of the duties of the office
discharge all of my duties to the office
of Third Ward Council Member
of Third Ward Council Member
in the city of Carroll, Iowa,
in the city of Carroll, Iowa,
as now or hereafter required by law.
and now and hereafter required by law.
JJ. Please raise your right hand. I, JJ Schreck,
I, JJ Schreck,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of
and
Iowa,
the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and that I will faithfully and impartially,
that I will faithfully and impartially,
to the best of my
to
abilities,
the best of my abilities,
discharge all the duties
discharge all the duties
of the office of at-large council member
of the office of at-large council member
in the city of Carroll, Iowa,
in the city of Carroll, Iowa,
as now or hereafter required by law.
as now or hereafter required by law.
Thank you, Gina, and congratulations to all new council and the mayor. Thank you. Please note, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, which is approval of minutes of the November 22nd meeting, approval of bills and claims. Under licenses and permits, we have the renewal of a Class C liquor license with Sunday sales for Kurt's Bar and Grill. We have the renewal of a Class E liquor license with Class B native wine permit and a Class C beer permit and Sunday sales from Sparky's One Stop in Carroll. And finally, we have the appointment of the 2022 Fire Department officers. Are there any questions with regards to the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
There's a motion and a second. There's no other discussion. We'll go ahead and vote, please.
Stace? Yes. Haley?
Yes.
Seaman? Yes. Cox?
Yes.
Dirk?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the oral requests and communications from the audience for items not on the agenda. Is there anyone here to speak on anything that's not on the agenda? Anybody online? Seeing none? Oh,
Is this the entire agenda?
yeah,
Is there
no,
discussion
the
on-
entire
is there
agenda should be on there's a page right in the back there.
Is there to be discussion about Adams Street?
That'll be coming up. That'll be coming up towards, where are we having that? It's in the work session at the end. Yep. The next item is under ordinances, and the first item under the ordinances is the 2021 redistricting of City of Carroll Council wards, and it is 5:23, and we'll open the public hearing. And when you're ready, we'll go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So council discussed this at the last council meeting about the redistricting because of the 2020 census. Here is a map of how the wards are currently divided. And based upon the discussion that was had at the last council meeting, the area that staff has recommended to take a look at to redistrict to even out the population a little bit more is more in the center of town, which is zoomed in. What's on the screen right now is the current ward lines. The recommendation was to move census tracts 42 and 43, if you can see, 42 and 43 from Ward 4 to Ward 1 to even distribute the population a little bit better. So tonight, the requirement is one, we have to hold a public hearing on this, allow the public to weigh in on the proposed change. And then the other items for discussion tonight include, the county has requested that Maple River Township become part of the voting district, or excuse me, the voting precinct in the city of Carroll, where mostly the northern half of Maple River Township would be part of the voting precinct with our Ward 2. Then the southern half of Maple River Township would be part of the voting precinct with Ward 3, which is currently the case right now. Updated information was posted on the website as of midday on Friday with the new legal descriptions that we received from the county on Friday. So that's a little bit more lengthy. They had a little bit of like distribution change too in their Maple River Township, so we're incorporating that. So there was a draft included in the agenda packet of that agreement. Just wanted to get council's input if this is okay, if we want to continue with this. And then also is an ordinance that was also updated due to those changes of the legal descriptions for the voting precincts that we received from the county on Friday. So tonight would be we'd be looking for council to approve the first reading, and then next council meeting next week, we'd look for the approval of the ordinance. If council is okay with entering into that agreement with the county for the voting precincts.
Does it change the population that much? Or did you include that in these already?
Well, when it comes to adding, to do the voting precincts, we don't have to worry about the population.
Oh, that's just where they can go.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep. We worry about the population in the city of Carroll and how the wards are distributed.
Okay.
And the recommendation by moving those two census tracts from Ward 4 to Ward 1 gets it really close to pretty evenly distributed.
I think that's what we had discussed that last time. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I've had nothing come to me.
Do you need a motion to accept the Maple River Township part of the city? Probably need that as a separate.
We will do that next council meeting.
Okay.
So tonight is the public
You just
hearing.
wanted information on that.
Yes.
Okay.
So tonight's the public hearing, and then if council wants to approve the first reading of the ordinance as amended or as what was posted on Friday, or if you want to do all of them next week.
We can do the
I don't
first
want
one,
to do
I
three
think.
at one time.
Yeah.
Okay. We could look for, approval of the first reading tonight.
So this is also a public meeting, and so if there's anybody in the public that have any questions with regards to the redistricting of the city of Carroll council wards, anybody here for that? Yeah.
What's the population distribution for sections 42 and 43 that we're moving?
I'm sorry, what was that?
The population distribution,
Yes.
how much is that we're moving? I think it would make more sense to just have your lines drawn right down 12th Street and Main Street than including 42 in there.
We had a map 2 weeks ago that was something similar to that, and some of the deviations were way off enough that this got us closer to 0 is where we ended up with this one.
And if I'm right, didn't we say that the voting place doesn't change for those people?
That is
So
correct.
that's not going to cause any confusion. The people that voted in that ward will vote in the same ward no matter that we switch them.
Yeah, so that for the voter, that would be really transparent
Right.
because Ward 1 and 4 vote in the same precinct location. So you may have to switch a table, but you'll be in the same building.
Are you asking for the variation from moving the districts, saying it's 12, add 12 and add 2 to the wards if I'm reading this chart?
No, it's, I think what you're requesting, and I'm just pulling up the report from last meeting.
There were 3 options that were available to us, A, B, and C. And C was the one that gave us the population the closest to 2,500 in each district. Or each ward, I should say.
So the block you're talking about is the block from Grant, East 11th on the south side, Clark on the west side, East 12th on the north side. There's 42 individuals in that block. So without, and that was presented at the last meeting to the council. If we
Here's the current.
correct. So if we kept that block in Ward 4, Ward 1 would be 30 people below the ideal population, and Ward 4 would be 44 people above the ideal population. And so by moving that block, that's how then Ward 1 would be 12 people above the ideal population, and Ward 4 would be 2 people above the ideal population. So it's getting it closer to that ideal population. And state statute talks about it, unless there's some extenuating reason why you can't get there, you should get as close to the ideal population as you can.
Did that answer your question further?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Was your statement to try to keep it more clear, so was it clear lines, or what was your goal, sir?
Well, just looking at the map, it would look like it would be more clear line if you went straight down that road. But it's not much difference in population.
This option C was the one that gave us the variation closest to zero. And with the idea that down the road, if there was more development in Ward 1 and Ward 4, that population is going to increase more, so it may change even down the road in 10 years. So this is good for what, 10 years? 10 years, I believe it is.
For 10 years of census.
Yeah.
This gets changed almost every 10 years when the census is up.
Are there any other questions from the public? Nobody online? If not, it is 5:31. I'll close the public hearing. Any other questions from the council? If not, I will look for a motion to approve the first reading, amending the city code, amending the ward boundaries and voting precincts.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. There's no other discussion. We'll go ahead and vote, please.
Fleshner,
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
Cox,
Yes.
Seaman, Space.
Yes.
Dirks.
Yes.
Motion's approved.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the Street Restoration 2022 Professional Services Agreement. And Randy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Your Adams Street Reconstruction project was originally scheduled for construction in 2022. During initial discussions, there was some brief discussion about the amount of decision-making needed to make that project move forward, and the fact that that could delay it, the letting of the project. In the event that it's delayed, it's recommended that an alternate project be developed so that a street project can continue for next calendar year. We have looked at either resurfacing or restoration, which is patching, which we did this year, and determined that due to the current time frame, the current time of year, the development of the project and a timely letting, we're recommending that a street restoration project be prepared for letting. To that end, we've requested a proposal from JEO Consulting Group to perform the design work for the project. They have provided one. The fees and scope are detailed in the copy that you have. In summary, the design work from survey through bidding is estimated at $49,000, and some work during construction at about $6,000. The timeline for development of that would be beginning immediately and prepare for letting in February of next year. This project was originally proposed in 5-year plan for 2024. So there's currently no funding budgeted for it. If it's to go ahead, that funding would be proposed for reestimate or amendment into the current budget for the design work at least. The proposed funding would be a combination of a local option sales tax, road use tax, and a small amount of general obligation bonding. Certainly, if the Adams Street project does get prepared for construction in 2022, this restoration project would be shelved for letting at a later date, later year. So unless there are any questions, I'd recommend your consideration of the engineering services agreement and passage and approval of the resolution approving that agreement with JEO Consulting Group.
What is the no later than time for Adams Street to, whether we proceed forward or shelve that one?
Well, I think that would depend on when it can be prepared for letting. And certainly we prefer to let contracts as early as practical. February, if possible, no later than March. We know that contractors really try to fill their schedules as early as they can, so they know they have work secured for the year. And a project of that size, we would like to be right in there on their, front part of their list of projects.
So who's accountable for the timeline on whether or not that happens?
Well, there's certainly in our contract we have right now with McClure, the timeline does set it up for letting in, I believe, in February. Now, in order to get to that point through the initial discussions, there was an indication that depending on the policies that are established and the length of time it takes to establish those policies, that it could delay that letting date. So this is just simply a proposal to protect, the downside of not having a street project for next year. And certainly what you have reviewed in the past included full depth reconstruction on streets every 3 years, and in the intervening 2 years, continuing with either resurfacing or restoration projects. This is the restoration project that I had originally thrown in for 2024 in that 2-year period. And if it's developed and Adams Street does go ahead, it'll just be shelved and let in 23 or 24, either one.
One last question, the policies that you mentioned, you're talking the policies that we're deciding here, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Randy, in your covering of funding for the proposed project, you don't mention special assessments, which is of course something the council will still be figuring out how or if they're going to incorporate. Just clarifying that's not a part of the plan for this letting at this time.
No, the street restoration project special assessment has not been included in that funding stream.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
Sure.
Randy, when will, in the memo from JEO, Exhibit A, it mentions that they will be working with the city to determine, patch locations. So if this moves ahead, or moving it up to budget years, when will you be doing that? When will you be making those decisions on the locations?
Between the time that this memorandum was prepared and today, those proposals have been made. And I can give you what we're proposing for the project that we're proposing is about twice as large as the one that we had this year. We had about 4,000 square yards patching this year. We're proposing about 8,000 for this project. And we would propose the street locations to be done would be Main Street from 13th to Randall Road, and Randall Road from West Street to Main, and 21st Street from West Street to Main, and Peeble Lane.
That was way too fast for me, Randy. Could you shoot that again?
Yeah.
Sure. Main Street from 13th to Randall Road. That's the north end of Main Street, basically, all the way to the north edge to the golf course. Randall Road from West Street to Main Street, which is about half of Randall Road. And then 21st Street from West Street to Main Street.
Thank you.
And also Peeble Lane, all of it, basically from Anthony to Main.
Have we resolved the on-surface drainage issues there, or is that something you'll keep in mind when resurfacing it?
On Peeble Lane?
Yeah, on people.
Yes, that's something we will try to address.
Fantastic. Lots of ice slicks there in some years, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Randy, it seems like the priority, I've seen the priority grant kind of ledger that you made in the past. And I'm thinking that it was the other side of the east side of Main Street was the same, was in the same priority level as where you're talking about,
East side of,
east side of Main Street on Randall
on Randall.
and the Cod Terrace.
Okay,
Yeah, what about those streets? Because they're
they,
been
Todd
presented
Terrace.
evidence that shows they're not so good.
Todd Terrace,
Yes.
absolutely is, and it
And
was,
that was on the high level of priority for you in the past.
yeah, we have.
That's not included here, and how about why?
We reviewed these several times over to try to get, and they can change if you desire to change any locations.
Well, I'm
that's
just
fine too.
assuming that you
But
use some logic.
Todd
here.
Terrace is up there, probably right near the east side of it. There's a lot of shattered slabs on top of the hill up there by,
I mean.
yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right.
Right.
But that's the
It
only
is.
reason I'm more familiar with that side. But I agree. Your side on the other side is, but I do know that these, the going east was high
Was on-
priority. I don't remember the west was
Okay.
at the time.
Yeah, I guess we just tried to review them and see where we thought the worst of the worst was and went as far as we
It
could.
certainly can change
to get-
from the last time I've looked too. I'm not
Yeah,
disputing
and-
that, so.
There are bad places that we're not getting to with 8,000 square yards. That's the problem. But it certainly, we can interchange any of these. We're going to begin tomorrow marking them out. So, but that would be fine too. There's a lot of bad streets.
No, as long as you used your best judgment in deciding which one's first, I would trust that, so.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Randy? If not, I'll look for a motion to approve the agreement with JDO Consulting Group Incorporated for professional services for the street restoration 2022 project.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. There's no other discussion. We're going to vote, please.
Base,
Yes.
Sturts,
Yes.
Fleshner,
Yes,
Haley,
Yes.
Cox,
Yes.
Seaman. Resolution is approved.
Thank you. The next resolution is the Seventh Amendment and Restated Urban Renewal Plan, and it is 5:43, and we'll open a public hearing.
Hey, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me, folks who are taking off, did you want to hear about work along Adams or?
No, that's my wife.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Just checking. Just didn't want them to miss it
She
later.
just said no thanks. She gets enough of it.
I'm gonna watch it on TV.
Thanks, Steve.
It is 5:43, and Mike, please, when you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight is the proposed Seventh Amended and Restated Urban Renewal Plan for the Central Business District project area. There's a number of changes that were made in this plan, in addition adding five project areas to the plan. Additionally, the amendment adds a number of urban renewal projects to the plan. Certainly, these are not projects that have to occur, but it gives the council and future councils flexibility to do any of these projects. So these projects include the ability to provide grants for interior building renovations for blighted buildings constructed prior to 1940. The ability for the city to provide grants related to a project approved for a downtown housing grant administered from the Iowa Economic Development Authority, which would alleviate blighted influences in a downtown. The ability to provide grants for facade and other exterior building renovations within the plan area. The ability to fund Quiet Zone on the Union Pacific Railroad corridor. The ability to fund Adams Street Reconstruction Project, and the ability to fund improvements as identified in Corridor Commerce 2.0 Master Plan. Now, one way to finance these projects is to use tax increment financing, which requires the amendment of the current Central Business District Urban Renewal Plan. And this is that process to do that. Now, at the November 8th meeting, the council approved a resolution directing that the public hearings be held and also to hold a consultation meeting with affected taxing entities, including Carroll County Board of Supervisors and the Carroll Community School District. The consultation meeting was held on November 15th. and we received no individuals at that meeting, and no public comments have been received since that. Additionally, we did publish a hearing of this in the Carroll Times-Herald on Friday, December 3rd, 2021. So the next step in the approval of this would be to adopt the resolution for the 7th amended and restated urban renewal plan. So the recommendation would be, after close of the public hearing, the council consider and approve the attached resolution determining an area of the city to be an economic development and blighted area, and that the rehabilitation, conservation, redevelopment, development, or combination therefore of such area is necessary in the interest of public health, safety, welfare of the residents of the city of Carroll, and designate such areas appropriate for urban renewal projects, and adopt the 7th amended and restated urban renewal plan. Unless you're, I don't have any other things, because if council has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them this evening. Thank you.
This is an open public hearing also. Are there any questions from the public with regards to the 7th amended and restated urban renewal plan? Is there anyone online?
They had to unmute their mics to.
If you're online and you have some questions with regards to the restated urban renewal plan, you'll have to unmute your mic, please. Seeing none. It is 5:47 and we'll close the public hearing. And are there any other questions from the council? If not, I will look for a motion to approve the resolution determining an area of the city to be an economic development blighted area, and that the rehab, conservation, redevelopment, development, or a combination thereof of such area is necessary in the interest of the public health, safety, or welfare of the residents of the city, designating such an area as appropriate for urban renewal projects, and adopt the 7th amended and restated urban renewal plan.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. There's no other discussion. We'll go ahead and vote, please.
Dirks?
Yes.
Fleshner?
Yes.
Seaman?
Yes.
Stace?
Yes.
Haley?
Yes.
Cox?
Yes.
Resolution is approved.
Thank you. The next and final item under resolutions is the consideration of a new 28E agreement for the public safety communication services between the city of Carroll and Carroll County. And Mike, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So Carroll County and the city of Carroll has operated a joint public safety communication system that first started back in 1975 through the Carroll Communication Commission. In 1987, the original agreement was amended to what is now the Carroll City/County Communication Commission. During this time, the operation has been jointly funded between both entities, with both entities paying 50% of the cost of the operation. For fiscal year 2022, the city of Carroll has budgeted $240,853 for the operation of the joint public safety system with Carroll County. So since 1975, like I noted, the city of Carroll has equally paid for this operation of a joint public safety communication system. Now, initially, the system was just servicing Carroll County Sheriff's Office and the Carroll Police Department. Over time, and especially with the advent of the 911 and digital paging and communication system, the system's grown to serve all the police, fire, and other public safety agencies countywide. But during this time, this arrangement has remained unchanged. So this has been an issue I know the council has brought up as a concern over the years, and it's discussed about, it really came to a head last year when discussions occur about adding additional dispatching staff. Now, while the city agrees additional dispatching may be necessary during peak times, the staffing issue has really pushed the question about the city funding and the financial investments being made by the city, especially in light of other agencies in the county that do not contribute financially to this arrangement. So city staff, Mayor Jensen, have been negotiating with Carroll County. We've had some really good discussions and did come to a proposed agreement. This proposed agreement does set out that the termination of the current city-county communication commission will occur It'll be replaced with a new 2080 agreement for public safety communication services between the city of Carroll and Carroll County. And that agreement really stipulates the following terms. The city will make a contribution annually fixed at $150,000 per year. The Communication Commission then will be, the Communication Center itself will be operated by Carroll County, and there'll be no ongoing board that will supervise, similar to what exists today. This agreement is a 10-year agreement starting as of July 1 of 2022, and the agreement would automatically renew at 5-year period for said terms and conditions, unless otherwise terminated by one of the other parties by January 16th of the year that the agreement is set to expire. I would also note the questions come up about the contribution and the agreement itself. It does specify the $150,000 with $60,000 shall be used by the county towards employee pension and insurance costs. And the reason that language is in this agreement, with the current arrangement being a 2080 with the cost being split 50-50, even though they're county employees, those employee pension and insurance costs can then run through our employee benefit levy that the city has. The county doesn't have a comparable levy, it just doesn't exist for counties. So putting that language in here allows us to still run those dollars through the employee benefit levy. Otherwise, the entire amount would have to run through our general fund, which would be detrimental really to the city moving forward with this agreement. So unless there are questions, staff is recommending council consideration of 2 resolutions. One, dissolving the current Carroll County or the Carroll City County Communications Commission, and a second resolution approving a 2080 agreement for public safety communication services between the city of Carroll and Carroll County. I'd be happy to answer any questions the council has this evening. Thank you.
Should we be stating in this, the 10-year agreement?
That would be in the agreement itself. So the resolution approves the agreement. And
Okay.
that specifies that in the agreement.
Okay.
So that at the end of 10 years, does this get voted on annually or does this go every 5 years?
So the way the agreement is written right now is at the end of 10 years, if there's no action taken by either party, it automatically renews. Now, it certainly doesn't mean, I know it came up today during the Carroll County Board of Supervisors discussion, you know, if there's a discussion point and people want to revisit it, then both parties could come together and agree to an amendment. But within that 10-year period or the renewal periods every 5 years, unless both parties agree to an amendment, they will continue as written.
And I kind of, for that next year, that instead of spending $250,000 to the comm center, we're only at $150. So we reduce that.
$90,000.
Yeah.
Now the first,
243.
now the first year, we always pay a quarter behind. So next fiscal year, we'll still have a quarter that will finish out.
Finish out the remainder.
And then
for
moving
other-
forward, so there will be a little bit of phase out period.
Any other questions for Mike?
No, after giving it a lot of thought, I think you did a good job making it more equitable, but not punitive for anyone. And also considering down the road, all the costs involved. I think locking in the $150,000 for 10 years is wise from our perspective. So I think you did a good job working with the county, and I think it's the way to go. You gave us a lot of other data that you didn't discuss, Mike, and it will reduce our obligation, given the 240 we're at, by $24 per the household. You mentioned it was $150,000 was the taxable value home, and but the county, it's going up under $5. So I think everybody is being treated fairly. Ideally, I'd love to see what most of our peer cities are doing, and that is doing the countywide levy. But I think that's too far of a leap from where we started. So thank you for your work, all of you
Yeah, there
that
was
worked on it.
some of those cities, it was just kind of everywhere. There was nothing
Yeah,
real
I know.
specific, and we got to something that was more in the middle. And, you know, it makes it more equitable across
Right.
everybody across the
Yeah,
county
it is.
versus just the individuals in the city having to pay so much extra.
Right, right.
And it's just the projected costs, in another 2 years, it was gonna be, they'd probably be over $300,000.
Right.
So,
This has already been approved by the supervisors as well.
It was approved this morning.
Today.
they did this morning. Yeah. You can call me, let me know, so. But, yeah, if there's any other questions for Mike, we have to, I need a motion to dissolve the current Carroll City County Communications Commission in that 28 agreement first.
So moved.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, we'll go and vote, please.
Fleshner,
Yes.
Dirk,
Yes.
Base.
Yes.
Seaman,
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
Cots.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
And then I need a motion to approve the new 28E agreement for the public safety communication services between the city of Carroll and Carroll County.
So, second.
There's a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, we'll go ahead and vote, please.
Seaman, Fleshner,
Yes.
Cots,
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
Base.
Yes.
Dirk.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is reports, and the first item is the downtown streetscape Phase 10 project. And Randy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bating Construction has substantially completed the streetscape Phase 10 project. Their substantial completion date was August 27th of this year. There's a couple of minor electrical items that have been delayed in delivery, and that's delayed final completion of the project. So you have probably noticed that there are blocks where no lights are on at this time. The actual contracted substantial completion date was September 30th of 2021. So the substantial completion was ahead of that. Batings are requesting early release of retainage on this project. And with the electrical work remaining to be done, that retainage can be released, but there will be about $9,100 or $9,200 withheld from that release. So we will retain that $91,7960, release all other retainage to them. And once the electrical work is complete, then the $9,100 will be released. So unless there are any questions, I'd recommend your consideration of acceptance of the certificate of substantial completion for the Streetscape Phase 10 project.
Are there any other questions for Randy? If not, I'll look for a motion to accept the certificate of substantial completion for the downtown streetscape Phase 10 project.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. There's no other discussion. We'll go ahead and vote, please.
Cots,
Yes.
Base.
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
Seaman, Dirk,
Yes.
Fleshner.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. The next item under reports is street restoration 2021, change order number 1, and certificate of substantial completion. And Randy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. During construction of the street restoration project, there was a change made to some crack filling material, and it's pretty minor change at $400, but it did result in the need to prepare change order number 1, and that's included it with your information. 10 Point Construction Company, the contractor, has also substantially completed that project. Their date of substantial completion was October 13th, and that compares to a contracted completion date of November 15th. The seating on the restoration project was completed after the end of the fall seeding. So it is considered incomplete at this point in time. 10 Point Construction has also requested an early release of retainage on this project, which they are eligible for. But because the seeding was incomplete, there will be withholding from that release in the amount of $21,840. So any retainage above that could be released to them. So unless there are any questions, I request your consideration of approval of the change order in the amount of $400 and acceptance of the certificate of completion for the street restoration.
They'll come back in the spring and just finish that then.
Actually, they seeded it after the weather turned cold so that it would not germinate this fall.
No.
So it's kind of marginally winter seeding. And they have had some success with it. In fact, they've done it in Carroll before, and we've had success with doing that. So the seed is down now. It's just that it was placed after the end of the seeding date, so we consider it incomplete until it grows. And if it doesn't grow, they have to overseed it in the spring.
Are there any other questions for Randy? If not, I will need a motion to approve change order number 1 to the street restoration 2021 project in the amount of $400.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. There's no other discussion. We're going to vote, please.
Base?
Yes.
Fleischner?
Yes.
Haley?
Yes.
Cox?
Yes.
Seaman? Yes. Sturts?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
And then any motion to accept the certificate of substantial completion for the street restoration 2021 project.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, we'll go ahead and vote, please.
Base?
Yes.
Seaman? Yes. Sturts?
Yes.
Fleischner?
Yes.
Cox?
Yes.
Haley?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. Bounce ahead here. The next item on the agenda is the work session, annual planning session, follow-up and discussion. And Mike, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The City Council held their annual planning session on Tuesday, November 16th. And again, this year, Elizabeth Hanson from Midwest Municipal Consultant LLC facilitated the session at Swan Lake Conservation Education Center. Now, Elizabeth submitted this to staff. Staff did make some minor clerical corrections to the preliminary report. These in no way change the intent that was discussed by the council at the work session and presents the report for the council to receive this evening. I would highlight on page 17 and top of 18, this presents the city's ongoing priorities for fiscal year 2022. And the middle of page 18 presents the city's proposed new initiatives for fiscal year 2022. Now, after tonight's meeting, the staff will prepare a separate document like we have in the past that will present at a meeting in January that will outline a work plan on these items over the next 12 months for council consideration and approval. This work plan will include for each item a timeline, a responsible party, and if needed, a targeted date for a future work session for each item. Now, this document does serve as a guideline for staff as we implement the priorities and action steps that council has adopted for next year and becomes implemented in the budget for next year. So I'm just going to take a few minutes and highlight the priorities. I'm not going to go through the ongoing priorities. There's kind of 5 categories of ongoing priorities. We did kind of as a change this year kind of highlight them, but one is creating a vibrant community. Efficient and effective government is a second subset. Economic opportunity is a third subset. And then infrastructure is the 4th subset of our current ongoing priorities. So new proposed initiatives for fiscal year 2022 kind of broke into 2 parts. New initiatives moving forward for consideration in fiscal year 2022 include 5 items. And these are in ranked order based on the preference of the council at the work session meeting in Swan Lake. Number 1 was consider LED light replacement for the runway airport or the airport runway, excuse me. Number 2 was sidewalk connecting Timberline to Pleasant Ridge versus city versus property owner kind of paid project. Number 3, and there was a tie for the next 3 items, but the tie for 3 was create a 5 to 10 year plan phase for implementing the Carroll Corridor Commerce 2.0 plan. Also, number 3, update the 2013 City Comprehensive Plan. And also number 3, commit funds to repair and preserve the cemetery stone wall, fence, pillars, buildings, and monuments. So other initiatives that are not moving forward based on the work session, and the next 2 are tied at, came in 6 on the preference discussion. A replacement of the parking lot behind the library and police department. Considering the hiring of a communication specialist, PR, PIO, to create a new, fresh marketing plan for the rec center. Public perception the city is doing, it needs to have improvement communications with the public. Number 8 is citizen survey update and as necessary to assure that citizen priorities are identified and addressed. And number 9 is for a viaduct on the west side of Carroll for police, fire, and ambulance service. So those last 4 are not moving forward as priorities. So with that, certainly this evening, the request is for the council to receive and file the 2021 annual planning session report, and happy to answer the questions the council has this evening.
So the new initiatives that didn't make it, they could come up next year, as an item too.
Correct. We clarified number 9 out there. It says west side. We clarified at the meeting that it's east and it wasn't changed.
Okay.
Because we already got a viaduct on the west side.
We can correct that going forward.
Question I was wondering is if we need to have a discussion on sidewalk connecting Timberline and Pleasant Ridge Road. The reason I bring that up is with all the feedback that we've gotten from the citizens. If it's just something we need to discuss, whether we want to keep it on, whether we want to remove it, I think it merits discussion.
I'd agree with that. I had a lot of communication too, and there's some concern both down that way.
I would like to see Pleasant Ridge stay on, but take off Timberline.
What, why?
Because there's a lot of activity on Pleasant Ridge and we haven't had any feedback there that they don't want it. It's just Timberline Road.
Right.
Yeah, that was all I got was Timberline Road.
Well, in fairness, I don't really think we've talked with folks on Pleasant Ridge either too much. We have with the others, the Timberline.
Just think with it being the number 2 priority and, staff using this as kind of marching orders where to go forward. I just don't want to seem waste your time.
I think the main part of the most important part of this has already been taken care of. And that's getting protection for that curve.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
right. I didn't view it as important. I was not a person that voted to put that up so high. And that was my reasoning is just from a safety standpoint, we've already done what we need to do. In discussing with the people in that area, it appears there isn't a lot of foot traffic up that high anymore on Timberline. And I can't speak for the other side, but those are the people, we all had the same letters.
Are any other currently sidewalks on anywhere on Pleasant Ridge?
Yes, there are sidewalks from, Grant Road west to, where Woodland Heights subdivision starts.
Is there sidewalks also, is there sidewalks more along the north side of that road?
Both sides.
Both sides.
Mhm.
Okay.
Now, the sidewalk on the north side does stop short of going up to Hidden Valley Drive.
Yeah, that's where Woodland Heights subdivision starts.
Okay.
So they were sidewalks are constructed on both sides in the newer subdivision area, that's the eastern part of it. And then the west part, which is Woodland Heights subdivision from back in 74, had no sidewalk requirement.
I would note, I was contacted by the property owner on the timber line that did want to see that sidewalk in.
I will, I heard comments from both sides, and I use that street a lot, live on Pleasant Ridge, and there are a lot of people in that area because of the rapid growth in that part of town that use Timberline, Hidden Valley, that U-shape, and then continuing on onto East Pleasant Ridge. There are a lot of people in that area that use Timberline that feel that they've told me they feel that they're at risk. And I've experienced this myself, and other people have talked to me about it, that there are people that they walk their dog or dogs in a lane on that curve. And I know I've had to slow down and wait for people who are walking, they filled the whole lane. I've had to wait for people to continue around that curve. And so I think your suggestion, Mike, to have some type of an open forum, because I've heard both sides, and it really is busy with all sorts of activities. And, we solved it on one side, but coming from the other direction, it is still a blind curve when you're coming up and then heading west. And I will tell you, the 4 streets the 4 houses to the west of us, our sidewalk ends where the sidewalk ends at our property line. And then there are 4 houses that were there before us. And that's where there is no sidewalk on the north or south side. And I don't know, for whatever reason, the last couple of years, I've been taking pictures, huge semis are using, and grain trucks and so on. And it's really becoming quite, without that sidewalk and huge trucks on Pleasant Ridge, it is really becoming quite an issue for people who are wanting to this and using it for whatever. So there's a lot going on in that area.
Brandy, is there any protocol on amount of traffic that you have to have before a sidewalk? Like if you have so much traffic, you have to have a sidewalk. There is nothing.
No, there isn't.
Otherwise 12th Street would be lined all the way.
I apologize. I think I mentioned I had a comment from someone on Timberline. I meant to say Pleasant Ridge is where I had that comment from. And that's a property owner that does not have a sidewalk that would support a sidewalk. So I apologize for that mistake.
Well, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not trying to direct one way or the other, but I do just think it merits discussion. Because like I said, we've gotten some good feedback since that night. And I kind of felt we made a decision without a whole lot of feedback outside of our group here. So just, like I said, a work session or a public meeting would be a great idea.
That's what I thought sounded like a work session.
Well, we've talked about for Timberline, but you've got Hidden Valley there also, if you want to connect around to Pleasant Ridge.
And there's no sidewalk on the east or west side there.
Might be a good thing to bring it back and have some public input from all the folks along both those roads.
And similar to any road project like this, because we would include this in road, we would always have public discussions. So do you want this amended to be something more of the lines of do you want to leave the current language? Do you want to change the language, or you strike like Pleasant Ridge, because I know that came up? Or Timberline, see, I'm doing it again.
It's okay.
I always flip those 2 roads, and I apologize. So do you want to do that, or do you want to just maybe even be more vague of have a public discussion about the sidewalk in that area? guess we'd look for direction on council. Where do you want us to
I think since we had a vote on it, that should stand. But I really believe that when you put together your summary and who's responsible and actions moving forward, then put into that document a work session. That's what we typically do. That's kind of been the precedent.
I would agree with that, and then that way, if somebody has been silent on Timberline, if they're supportive, they've got the opportunity to present their case too.
Otherwise, if we're gonna sit up here and negate our work session, why have a work session?
What, my question would be when if you read this, you're talking about possible change. Sidewalk connecting Timberline to Pleasant Ridge, to me says go up Timberline and then, and Hidden Valley and then stop. So we don't need to stop.
No.
We need, so we
To
need to
continue it around.
at least show, to connect the sidewalk on Pleasant Ridge.
Right, there are four
Because
houses.
it is, when I read that, as it stands, it says, just make an angle.
We need to
And
connect it
doesn't
around.
mention connecting all the way down, which,
I
Well,
think that's what
in
we
other
meant.
words, right, and it's not worded that way, so.
And don't forget, this is also connecting to Rolling Hill South too, which is where we're seeing expansion. That's where I live. You know, for sure, it's a straight shot off Timberline to the west as opposed to going south on Hidden Valley. There's some connection that needs to happen there, and if we're gonna do it, you just will do it all the way around.
Well, you're saying taking Timberline further west,
Yeah,
which
just
it also
walking-
doesn't say that here, and I don't
Right.
recall really voting that way either.
Well, I think the big thing is what I'd like to see come out of this is just the message that this is gonna be discussed. It's not a hard and fast plan. It's not what we're driving forward with, but people will have the opportunity to present their ideas.
And when we talked Timberline before, Mike, to your point, we had very good turnout from the people who lived along there. And I think it'd be great to see all those affected be able to come back in and have that discussion early on, which everyone who's spoken has mentioned that at this point.
Yeah, and that wasn't a work session, that was just Brandy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we communicated and they showed up.
It may just all turn out to be just an extension of the current Pleasant Ridge sidewalk all the way up to Hidden Valley. But I think if you have a work session and you're able to discuss that with the people that are involved, that may be what you end up coming up with, but at least it keeps the discussion going forward.
Well, and I think we should have a review on what our sidewalk ordinance is also. And are we going to enforce it?
So do we want to change the sidewalk connecting Timberline to Pleasant Ridge? The sidewalk connecting Timberline to existing sidewalk on Pleasant Ridge? Does that make sense?
You could go, I
I
don't
would go-
know if I'd be that specific, but.
I would go with what Carroll said. We voted on it.
Just leave it as
This
is.
was to give marching orders to staff.
This allows staff to develop a plan, and it allows it to go through a process where the public can still get involved.
And it'll develop out further as it goes.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's fine to leave the language as is.
Okay. Any more discussion or questions for Mike? If not, I'll look for a motion to just receive the 2021 annual planning session report. There's a motion and a second. We've no other discussion. We'll go to vote, please.
Cox?
Yes.
Hurst?
Yes.
Seaman?
Yes.
Fleischner?
Yes.
Haley?
Yes.
Davis?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. The next item on the reports is request from Kemper Catholic Schools to use the adult softball fields for girls softball in the 2022 session. And Mike, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Kemper Catholic School System has made a request for the city to use the adult softball fields for the 2022 girls softball season. Now, in a typical season, there'd be 12 to 15 home games in a night. Most nights would be a junior varsity followed with a varsity game. Practices would be held on non-game days at the field and would be typically in the morning once the summer vacation begins. So a few items of note regarding Kemper's use of these fields. One is the outfield is deeper at the adult softball field than a regulation high school field would be. So Kemper is proposing to use a removable temporary fence for its games. Kemper would purchase and install it. This is used by other schools around the state. They believe it'll take about 15 minutes to set up, and then would be removed at the end of the game by either staff or players for each game. Now, there is an initial concern with installing it with the in-ground sleeves that would be used for the fence. The irrigation at that field was installed a long time ago, and we don't have great records on the location of the irrigation system out there. So it needed to be understood that any damage that would occur during the installation, Kemper would be responsible for repairing that damage. Additionally, these fields were built originally with a 50-50 partnership between the city and the adult softball league that's out there. Now, the adult softball leagues, from that perspective, would still have priority of the two fields for their weekly game nights. Those occur on Tuesday and Friday nights, and currently they do use both those fields that evening. So Kemper would need to schedule their games around, and certainly with discussions with Kemper, they've indicated that they can work around the adult softball league games without an issue. And then similar to other city outdoor athletic facilities, staff would suggest that any signage be temporary in nature and removed from the site after each game. And that's similar to what we do with Merchants Park. So if the city would decide to permit Kemper to use the field, staff would suggest that this would be a one-year trial period before entering into any multiple year agreements. Our recommendation would be an annual fee of $1,750. This is approximately $25 per hour for the season, and it takes into account the cost of lighting the field and then park department personnel duties and costs associated with that. So the recommendation this evening is to consider the request from Kemper Catholic School and direct staff on how to proceed. And I would note John Steffes, president, is here tonight also to answer any questions.
Do you know when the adult softball season starts?
I don't, to be honest.
Bob?
Oh, Bob. Sorry, come on up, Bob. Real quick question. When does the adult softball season
All right,
start?
back in the late 70s, Dave Allen and I, we went to run our tournament to make some money that maybe we could put some softball fields in. No budget ever provided money for softball fields anywhere, so. And at that time, Dr. Collison was on, he was either mayor or on the city council. We came to a proposal to him to say, hey, anything you put up, we'll match. He said, you're kidding me, an organization that wants to help out and pay when they help the city out. And I said, yeah, we're willing to do it. So when we got started, there was nothing down there. We used the Little League field, but you had to move fences around to get them to use it. And that was over 40 years ago. So every year we would put lights up and we would pay half, city would pay half. Fencing up, we would put half, city would put half. Sprinkling system, same thing. We and then we started making a little bit of money, so we started giving away scholarships. So every year we gave away anywhere from 5 and 10 to each school. So we're up to 20 scholarships at $200 a piece to the kids. And this is something that they've worked for, and they get their money, but they're also putting some hours in. They're required to put some hours in at the butt open. So we slowly built this thing up. I just don't want to lose control over the fields or have something permanent put up, like a fence or something on the field to ruin the irrigation system or anything. I'm willing to work with Kemper on this. This is fine, but they're men's slow pitch softball fields. Way back when Scott Parcher was the superintendent, he went around the council and said, hey, you go around and find out what kind of field we should build. So he got I don't know where it was, up north someplace. He found a field. It had a filtering system to it, and they had red rock clay on top. Well, red rock clay we use it in everything now in town, because if it rains, sponge it off, you can play. Get that squeezy feel. And the teams knew when they came to Carroll that they were going to play, no matter what the conditions were. And they always respected that now. And now they're probably two of the best fields in the state of Iowa. Everybody loves coming there because they know the games are going to get in. And that's kind of the background on it, and we've got it built up, and we're starting to, concession stand's 40 years old now. So we're slowly needing money for that, so we start doing less scholarships through the years and trying to put some more money into that. So this year I'm working with Carroll Cooler to get a new reefer put inside the concession stand. We're also doing probably a new PA system on it. So we're slowly working to get these things done on it. And city's been great. We've been broken into 5 or 6 different times, and city's helped build that up or helped repair the damage that's been done through those. I repaired a bunch of locks in the past that people were trying to get inside. So it's something that I want to keep kind of dear to my heart to keep this thing going. But they are adult men's softball fields or slow pitch. So but I'm willing to work with Kemper on getting something figured out. I just have to figure out a night that works for our leagues that we've had in the past. So if there's some conflicts there, I want to meet with all of our teams first in the county.
So when does your season start?
We usually start I have my meeting in April, but I want to move up this year, so gives Kemper a chance to fill their schedule and stuff out. I'm gonna try to do it in January and to have our county meet with all of our teams in and see if we have enough teams. As you know, everything's starting to drop as far as participation and stuff, and softball is nothing different than any other league. But I'm trying to go out to the other towns and bring them into Carroll to play. So hopefully that'll try and keep our numbers up.
So what would be the expected first date for your games?
Last year, and because of the pandemic, we used to play all the games in Carroll. Pandemic hit, and all these little towns, Willie, Templeton, Albert, Dedham, they all wanted to spread the teams out, so you didn't have a chance of hoping hit in their area. So we had 3 teams in each, and they played double headers the whole time. Each one of the places said having all the games in Carroll. So I'm trying to get them all back in Carroll again if I can. These teams have tournaments in their own towns anyway, so.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out is how much of an overlap there's gonna be between your season and Kemper's season.
Probably playing at the same time, June's a big month, May, June, and first part of July.
You guys are done about the end of July?
We have a sub-state in July, which starts probably, maybe a couple of days after the 4th of July, so. That probably wouldn't impact games down there that much on that, but.
So are you gonna have a dog game on the north side of the field and Kemper's gonna be on the south side of the field at the same time?
That's been proposed. I don't know if that's going to happen. We run the concession stand. I have somebody to run the concession stand.
Okay.
So we'd have to take down all the beer signs and have none of that up if that happens.
And I'm getting at it, you're not gonna serve alcohol at the same time Kemper's playing?
No.
Okay.
We're not gonna, and that's one thing that would hurt softball if you couldn't have some adult beverages that they drink once in a while. So
Yeah.
we wouldn't try to play on those nights at all. We try to play on a different night.
Okay.
And I think
No, there wouldn't be a conflict with that at all.
What was there in those exact spots?
It was bare. There was nothing there.
Okay.
And I tried to buy up there where the Carrollton is and north of little apartment complexes are. Back then, softball was really, really big, and you had to almost have 3 fields to host a tournament, national tournament, state tournament, whatever. And that's when the hotels started to build up a little more in town. And I offered the guy that owned it like 10 grand. I could have had my house at that time. And he said, well, build some hotel or some apartment complexes up here, and at least 50, 60,000 to do that. So he owns another property with it too. So I didn't get that done, but the 2 fields stayed. And those have worked out well. We had state tournament there 5 or 6 different times.
Maybe my next question is for John. Where are you guys currently playing?
Currently, we're sharing with Carroll Public Softball Fields. And next year, it's been talked about, the Carroll's Athletic Association is going to tighten the schedule. So we are working our way with Carroll Public. However, with the tighter season next summer, the challenges with our AD Mike Power here in Carroll, it's going to be even more challenging to share that field.
Share that field, and then so you guys can have a commensurate amount, same amount of home games.
Right.
You guys are driving all the time.
as well as practices too. And to have it in that same complex where the baseball stadium is
Yeah.
a big advantage.
You wouldn't need those fences up for practice then. Here's my one question. I read this, it doesn't mention anything about the base lengths. Have you addressed that?
Are they the same?
What,
They're actually the same distance from
Are
high
they the
school
same?
and.
So there's no
softball now.
problem with
They
putting
changed
in a
from
new-
55 to 60, and then they have stakes out
yes,
already.
I know that slow pitch is 60. What's softball?
Just the pitching mound will be different.
62?
Yeah.
60 feet.
60 feet,
They're the
okay.
same.
Yeah.
It's pitcher's mound, the only thing that's different.
Perfect.
And they can
All right,
move,
good.
they can move those to adjust on it.
I'm just concerned about, how to take care of the posts that have to be dug into the
Yeah.
bases. So, great.
Bob, you'd mentioned having a meeting in January sometime.
Now, I'm gonna try and have one earlier this year to alleviate some of the problems that might arise with the late schedule. I usually have it in April.
President Steffes, is this something you need action on before he could hold that meeting, or where's your timeline at for getting things submitted for you?
Well, we'll make it work with Carroll. We'll have to if it doesn't work, but there'd just be a lot of extra advantages if we could use those fields instead of sharing it with.
I apologize, I wasn't clear. Do you need a decision on this tonight moving forward, or is after Bob's meeting in January, say by the 1st of February, acceptable? I don't know how your schedule
I
plays
think
together.
we're okay. I think we have time because your 2 nights are Tuesdays, Fridays.
What's that?
Your nights are Tuesdays and Fridays, I believe, right?
Tuesdays and Friday usually, yeah, and I don't know what the schedule, but every year it seems to split a little bit different, especially if you spread them out to all the towns, which I like to have them all come back to Carroll, then we play Tuesday, Friday all the time.
Yeah, either way, we'll work around their schedule.
Okay, thank you.
John, are you gonna use, if this gets okayed, are you gonna use just those fields, or are you gonna go back and forth from the Carroll field when it's open, or are you staying just with this?
I would just this one.
Okay.
Bob, you're comfortable working with Kemper and balancing things out there, you said?
Yeah, we'll run the concession stand down there too when they have their game, so we'll work around that. I've already talked with my niece Cootie, who will run their tournament, we'll run the concession stand for them. If it works out, we just have to get a schedule so she knows what's going on, and me too, so. So I don't schedule something down there that would affect their schedule somewhat.
So is it just not working out that when Carroll's games are away, Kemper can't get their games in? Is that?
The bigger issue is the conferences. Beeson doesn't have control of his conference schedule. I don't on my side. There's too many times that they're home, we're home, and we can't control that. The conferences won't bend on either side. And it's Carroll High's field, so.
Can I say something about that? Just, so the state of Iowa gave a no contact week now. And so they pushed everything tight. We still have to get the same amount of games in. And so there's huge scheduling conflicts with their conference and our conference, trying to get the games in, and there is no control over that. Like we got to play Winterset, and they've got to play Red Oak, and and the sooner a decision is made on this, the better for both schools, just to help out to get this scheduling done, because we're sitting trying to figure out where we need to go and how we need to arrange our schedule, and they're in the same boat.
Brian, would you introduce yourself and just real quick, please?
I'm Ryan, I'm the coach at Carroll High. I didn't know this was on the agenda, that's not why I'm here, sorry.
I wondered which piece you were here for.
I'm here around the street, so. But that's, that is the thing. We like partnering with them, but it is a disadvantage for them, and us as well, with just having that one field available for practice and stuff. And we have 3 levels. They're trying to get 3 levels of girls on the fields at the same time, and it's really difficult. So
You got varsity, junior varsity, and freshman girls are all playing, and they also got to practice, and you still got to arrange games.
yeah, and so it's difficult to find for both of us, it's difficult to find a practice time when they have a home game. So
Usually our fields are open. I know
Yeah.
Kemper practiced on them many times before. early in the morning, as long as they're off by, 5:30, 6 o'clock. When our things get started, we're glad to work with them on, that was even in the past, so. I think they'll go see a tournament there for quite a few years at our softball conference. Then they didn't need a fence, now you guys need that 100 or 200-foot fence up every game? Or can you play it open?
The CYO tournament, technically, their stats don't count because they don't have that fence up. So they're not regulation high school games without that temporary fence. And so
In high school games, they have to have
in high school games, it has to have a 200-foot fence.
Thank you.
Yep. All right.
No, that was good.
John, have you actually had to maybe say, play games on the road, unfortunately, because of the conflicts in the past where you would have been at home?
Yep.
It hasn't happened a lot, has it?
Yeah, actually, last year we had to move probably about 3 games because of that issue. Yep.
We added two conference schools at Carroll as well. So that's 2 additional home games that have to happen. So that's what bumped them
Yeah.
as well last year.
Plus 1 week less too.
And 1 week less.
But you got 6 classes of girls that have got to play. You got to play
Freshman.
freshman, JV, and varsity, and it's both schools. It's a lot of games.
Bob, I'd asked earlier if Mr. Steffes was okay with waiting till the end of January so you could have your meeting. Are you okay if the city proceeds forward with this before you have your meeting?
Yeah, again.
If the city proceeds forward and makes a decision to
Yeah, we
do
just
this,
have to make
okay.
it work, I guess, before I have a meeting.
We're just considering the request.
I understand. I'm
It'd be
just trying
tougher
to
for
flush it
them.
out.
It'd be tougher for them to organize if we didn't say yes first.
Exactly, yeah.
Are you thinking to proceed with this, Mike, an agreement? I take it an agreement means a written agreement. So everybody knows, what's going on, and things go smoothly. It looks like they want to work together. Could we have some type of written agreement to consider at our next meet in a week, or is that too fast?
Probably very unlikely.
Okay, okay.
I'm a miracle worker some days, but that,
Oh, you can't work.
we're gonna want to work with both parties.
So.
We really have to have it completed by probably end of day tomorrow, just with our agenda process
Sure.
to get it on the agenda. So I would say next week is,
Okay, well, but you're gonna work together.
We'll work
and-
together.
Because you mentioned liability with the sprinkler system and so that needs to be in there.
Yeah. So, you need a motion to accept for the request, or can we, can you?
just give me direct, I mean, what I'm hearing.
That's what I guess I'm looking at is,
So let me summarize what I've heard is we want to work with both parties. We want to figure out how to allow Kemper to use this field, but working in the confines that we have an existing user that really has built a good facility out there. So we need to respect their use also. Does that sound fair to council? Sound
I
fair?
can explain the situation to Chad too, so he knows about it.
Yeah.
Jacob was on the fence, he was always on board.
then maybe just bring the agreement to the first meeting there in January.
Probably be the first meeting.
Yes, so we can review the agreement.
Right.
Maybe take action.
Sure, yeah.
But I think Bob's group needs, they're
Priority.
gonna set the parameters. And it
But
sounds
the-
like John's willing to
the
work
work,
around
yeah.
them, so that's, right?
But it would certainly take the pressure off the Carroll field then too.
Yes,
And-
yeah,
Good.
sounds
Yep.
good.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, and we want to thank Bob for all his work and like Merchants Park, using the baseball stadium. Kemper's very grateful for using that wonderful facility. And the last summer state baseball tournament, I think, was a wonderful example of Kemper working with the city, how much fun we all had, and Carroll Booster Club as well. So I think that same spirit, I think, will go forward using these fields too. So appreciate keeping a lot of the activity down in that area. We'd like to keep as much of the out-of-town visitors in that area. Kemper can help with that.
So much parking down there, it allows people to get in and get out.
And restrooms are already there,
Yeah.
concession stands are already there. We've had some questions about building our own, and I'm not in favor of that because we all know how expensive a new restroom and a new concession stand and a parking lot all cost. So if we have something there and Bob says it's one of the best in the state, it'd be great to see it being used a lot, even more.
Try and use what we can.
Thank you very much for considering it.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. Okay. Let's see, the next item is the report of bid opening, 100-inch mower parts department. Then you, Mike, okay.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The city received bids on December 7th for a 100-inch park department mower. We received one bid from Van Wall Equipment. The equipment was $44,711.38 with a $5,000 trade-in for a final cost of $39,711.38. The pre-bid estimate was $42,000, so it did come in under estimates. I would note that we did send this out to 8 local companies that we solicited bids from. 2 did submit proposals. 1 did state in the proposal they couldn't meet the specifications and declined bidding. So recommendation is for the mayor and council to consider the approval of bid from Van Wall Equipment of Madrid, Iowa for a 100-inch mower in the amount of $39,711.38. Be happy to answer any questions council has.
Any questions from Mike? If not, I'll look for a motion to approve the bid from Van Wall Equipment, Madrid, Iowa for a 100-inch mower in the amount of $39,711.38.
So moved.
Second. There's a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, we'll go ahead and vote, please.
Stephen? Yes. Stace?
Yes.
Fleischner?
Yes.
Dirk?
Yes.
Cox?
Yes.
Haley?
Yes. Thank you. The next item is the waiving of purchase policy number 50501 for the purchase of Cybex treadmills. And Mike, please.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Currently, the fitness room has 9 aging Cybex treadmills. These are fairly popular by our members. 3 of the treadmills are 2015 models and 6 are 2016 models. And due to current condition, wear and tear, we are currently looking to replace 4 of these units at this time. Now, I would note we did purchase some treadmills last year that were not Cybex based on the low bid. What we are finding is our members are not using those, are not popular. And so we are requesting a waiver of the purchasing policy to purchase and replace with Cybex treadmills. Now, we're not replacing those. We'll run them through the life cycle, and when they're warranted to be replaced, we'll replace them at that point. But we'll continue to get those. So there are the quote for 4 new Cybex R series treadmills is $23,651.74. And like I noted, since our purchasing policy requires the solicitation of 3 price quotes for these items between $10,000 and $50,000, we're requesting the waiver of the purchasing policy to purchase these items. So the recommendation is City Council approve waiver of the purchasing policy 501 to purchase 4 Cybex R series treadmills for the purchase price of $23,651.74. I'd be happy to answer any questions the council has this evening.
Any questions for Mike?
I did ask Mike, because we're just getting one quote, you know, are they taking us or anything, or, you know, and is there another Cybex dealer we can check out, but we can't. It's the only one, but he did verify that this is a good quote.
It's a fair quote. I mean, it's obviously more than maybe a unit we could purchase, but again, just with what our members want, it's not unreasonably higher than what we would expect for a treadmill.
Are we using our Sourcewell contract pricing for this, or is that advantageous for this or not?
I don't know that question. That's a good question. And I'm not sure if this product is through that, but we can check on it. Okay.
Through this company.
Okay. We can check on that and we'll verify it.
May not
before
yield
we
any
make the
fruit,
purchase.
but yeah.
Need to wait?
Wait. All right. See, the equipment's down there for the people who are using it. I mean, it's not like it's not going to get used.
And they may have bid this with Sourcewell included too. I just don't want to leave any money on the table.
I don't know that answer. So certainly we can check on it, and if the council wants to condition it, that if we didn't to would come back, we can do that also.
Next week.
That bid will hold till next week. We do it. That'd be something you probably could get by next week, wouldn't it?
Expires February 6th. So yeah, or 8th February, 2022.
So it's still, so if you want to delay it a week, we can.
Is that okay, Wade? Yeah. Motion, just take, motion to table the, Cybex treadmills for 1 week.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. There's no other discussion. We'll go ahead and vote.
Flashner,
Yes.
Cox,
Yes.
Seaman,
Yes.
Dirks.
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
Base.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
I just thought that Sourcewell did like vehicles, motor vehicles.
They do everything.
Oh. Something new. The next item is the waiving of purchasing policy number 0501 for the purchase of the Kaiser indoor bikes. And Mike.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a request to purchase 2 Kaiser M3i indoor bikes to replace 2 older bikes that we currently have in the exercise room for a total cost of $3,362.50. The 2 older bikes and then will be rotated into the weight room, and then the current bikes that are in the weight room will then be sold by silent bid to the highest bidder, like we have other equipment. The city purchasing policy again requires us to solicit 3 price quotes. Because these are used in our fitness room, we want consistency with the bikes. We are requesting that the council consider waiving the purchasing policy to purchase these 3 new indoor spinning bikes without obtaining additional quotes. So the request by staff is for the city council to approve waiving of the purchasing policy 501 to purchase 2 Kaiser M3i indoor spin bikes with a purchase price of $3,362.50.
It's this one.
Nothing to sort of swallow them.
No. Okay. Are there any other questions for Mike with regards to the Kaiser indoor bikes? If not, I'll look for a motion to approve waiving purchasing policy number 0501 to purchase 2 Kaiser M3i indoor spin bikes for the purchase price of $3,362.50.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, go ahead and vote, please.
Cox,
Yes.
Flashner,
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
Dirks,
Yes.
Seaman.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Thank you. I trust everyone's read the committee reports. I have no comments this evening. Are there any comments from the city council? Any comments from the city manager?
None this evening.
If not, we will start the work session on the Adams Street reconstruction. And Mike, when you're ready.
Recommend the 5-minute biological
Oh.
break this year.
Okay, so approved. We'll see you back in about 5 minutes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, it doesn't just have to be me. I don't actually have to go.
Oh, I thought you had to go. All right. Is there
I
anybody?
just know we
who
get
wants
sitting in here for so long.
Just 5 minutes? Okay.
I think it'd be prudent.
All right. Okay, all right. Yep, so now we're gonna go ahead and get started with the work session on the Adams Street reconstruction, and we have Terry Lutz here and Cody. Cody is also here, and Mike is gonna go ahead and start.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and I know we have a lot of interested parties in the audience. I just wanted to start with a few comments because I think as we look at this project on Adams Street, this is a total reconstruction project. It's a little bit different than we've done in a very long time. And really Adams Street and frankly, a lot of our infrastructure roadways in the city of Carroll have gotten to the point that they're just really at the end of life. There is no more maintenance that can be done on a lot of these roadways. And to be honest, frankly, the city is not making the investment in our infrastructures that we really need. And to be honest, there's no city or county in the state of Iowa or probably even the country that's really keeping up with the infrastructure needs that we have out there. With the dollars that the city has in place, and frankly, some decisions that the council made about a year ago, we have 64 miles of road in the city of Carroll that we maintain here. The council's now set us at a path that we're going to reconstruct a half a mile of roads every 3 years. So we're going to do a half a mile roads reconstruction and then maintenance in the 2 years between those periods of time. So we're currently on a path to replace our roads every 384 years. There's not a lot of people that would think that roads are going to last 384 years. That's way beyond the life expectancy of any road. But that's what the path we're on. Now, what does special assessments and why are we even talking about it? Well, again, we haven't taken on a road reconstruction project in Carroll of any substance for over 40 years. And we're really at a point that as we do these projects, we have to look at kind of every tool in the toolbox. And one of those that state statute talks about is special assessments. And it allows us to leverage those dollars towards the bonding dollars that we're going to put into it. It really allows us to leverage those dollars a little bit further. So Suzanne Gerlach with PFM Financial, she did some scenarios, and one of the things it shows is if under the current model, if we do not do special assessments, our debt service levy would be about $1.40. With special assessments, the debt service levy could actually drop to $1.22, and actually, depending on what scenario that's been put together by McClure Engineering, could go down, I believe, down to 97 cents. But I think the alternative question is we're not investing enough in our infrastructure, and we're not keeping up with our infrastructure. So I think the alternative way to look at it, other than some of the information that Suzanne put together, is what if we invest the dollars that we're really going to be saving from the street assessments, instead of lowering the debt, we actually reinvest those dollars back into our road projects. That's frankly, I think from a staff's perspective, we need more dollars in our infrastructure. And so if you look at scenario one, that street assessment will allow us to do not a lot, but 0.2 miles of additional roadway. And now you're at a point that instead of 384 years, we are going to place them over 270 years. Again, it's a long horizon, but it certainly moves that ball further down the goal line. So I think, again, we're early in the stage of even any discussion about street assessment. There's no decision has been made. Staff believes at this point, really, we need to have a thorough discussion about all the options because, again, we're not investing in the infrastructure that we have in our community. 64 miles of road at the $3.2 million. I mean, you're at about $500 million is what we're talking about. We could stop funding our entire general fund operations for the city. We're talking about police, fire, library, parks, all of it. And it would take us about 80 years to replace all of our streets. So the funding, every city's facing this. This is not unique. But I think as cities are getting more into this, it is very common to have street assessments for the very reason that really property taxes and road use tax dollars from the state are not sufficient to really keep up. We can have discussions about, well, if you wouldn't have done just this one project, maybe you could have done all these streets. Well, again, the reality is $500 million, it's a big number, and there's no tax structure of any city, county, or other entity in Iowa or really around the country that can fund their infrastructure needs. These costs are exorbitantly high, and it's a dilemma that we all face. So that's why we're having this discussion. Again, street special assessments are not new in Carroll. We've done them in the past, but we haven't done a reconstruction project in such a long time that it's really fresh. It seems like a new concept, but in reality, it really is not totally new in Carroll. So I'm going to turn it over to Terry and Cody from McClure Engineering to kind of run through their discussion.
Okay, do I need to be in this mic for any reason?
It helps a lot,
Okay.
but you don't have to be at that.
I'm gonna try, because I hate talking to people with my back to them, and I'm sure these people want to hear a lot, because they're probably here.
Now, if you wanted to sit down and use one of these mics, that would be an option.
Yeah, I'll do that, that way I don't have to. Okay, so. All right. So real quick, I'm Terry Lutz, McClure Engineering Company, Cody Forge with us, and McClure Engineering Company as well. And I think the primary purpose of tonight is when we were, when I was on the phone the other day when we talked, we had agreed to come back and visit with the council about assessments. And just the purpose primarily tonight is to give everybody just a general idea of how they, kind of why you use them and how they can be applied, and then try to give a general sense of the impact that it could have on property owners. You're about, as Mike said, you're about to embark on a long-term roadway improvement program for the city. And we had conversation, probably the first project you do could potentially set precedent for the city for many, many years to come. And with the size of the, given the cost that you're about to undertake over the next 50 years or whatever, it's a big number. And I think it's wise for the city to look at all kind of alternative ways in which to finance roadway improvement projects. And you'll see in a minute here that there's not a lot of options for cities to pay for roads. And oftentimes when we do these, the public has a sense that, hey, we pay our property taxes, we pay our water bill, we pay our sewer bill. Isn't that enough money to fix our streets? Unfortunately, fixing streets really comes at an expense that's really not built into the general fund. And there are limited ways. The city only has so many tools in which to pay for streets. Special assessments are one way to do it. Every time we talk about special assessments, it brings the public out because there's a lot of things to be kicked around. So I think the purpose of tonight is to, again, as Mike said, absolutely no decisions have been made. We're here tonight on a volunteer basis because we have an office here in Carroll. We want to continue to be a good partner with Carroll. And so we're here tonight to kind of just maybe talk about how they look. It's more of an educational session, opportunity to ask as many questions as you want. And we'll show you some rough ideas on how they are applied and what it would mean to you as a property owner. How many people here live on Adams Street? Okay, good. So you're going to walk out of here tonight with a general idea of what assessments could do to you as a property owner, depending on whatever policy the city council comes up with. And we're also going to talk a little bit about ways in which the city could go about establishing policies if you decide you want to move forward on the next step. So with that, I'll start on the first, and you know what, I've got a few of these, if you want to hand those out to those folks. Does every council member have a hard copy?
No. They want some hard copies?
Okay, we've got hard copies if you'd like to keep them, and then we brought a few, I didn't realize.
Thanks, Cody, yeah.
There's a couple here for anybody that would like.
As we go through this, if you have questions, either council or public, we're here, this is a work session, so fire away. We're here to answer as many questions as we can. But, first of all, as we said, cities are limited on how many, or how they can actually pay for streets. We have typically general obligation bonds are the primary way in which cities can finance street improvements. And for those of you that don't know it, cities are limited as to how many general obligation bonds or how much general obligation debt they can actually take on. They're limited, they cannot spend more than 5% of the general total valuation of the city in general obligation debt. So it's a limited resource, and so you have to work within the general obligation bonding limits when you're planning street improvements. The general fund can be used, but typically general fund money, it's already accounted for with police and fire and everything else it takes to run the city. So typically it's not very practical to use general fund money. Road use tax, usually not enough. Cities don't get enough of road use tax to hardly pay for operations, let alone for any kind of repairs. Typically revenue bonds can be used for the utility work underneath the street, sewer and water, but typically cannot be used to pay for the streets themselves. Do you guys have a stormwater utility here in town? Okay, so you pay a stormwater utility fee on a monthly basis. Typically those fees, again, don't generate enough to replace or improve storm sewers, but they are there for some maintenance purposes. And so that brings us to the special assessment idea. And one of the beauties, if there is a beauty of special assessments, is that it does shift a portion of the cost of doing a public improvement to the property. In fact, this is the basis of assessment that the courts have upheld. It shifts the cost of the public improvement to the properties that are most benefited from that improvement, as opposed to fixing a street on the west end of town and having the person on the east end of town that isn't impacted at all from that street of having to pay for it. Now, typically when assessments are used, there's still a general obligation portion that the whole city shares in. But what happens is, I've heard this comment often, is that, hey, my street looks terrible. Why don't you fix my street? Why are you fixing the other guy's street? Well, if you have special assessments and fix the other guy's street, he's going to pay a little bit more than the person whose street is bad that's not getting fixed. Someday, if you live on the bad street, your street will probably get fixed. And if the city uses assessments, you would have the privilege of paying an assessment at that time. So if you think about the benefit that properties derive from the improvements and shifting some of that cost to those properties that benefit, that's the theory behind an assessment. It's pretty simple, actually. If you flip to the next slide, thank you. When we do assessments, there's a million different ways assessments can be levied on the property. There's really four primary things that have to be held if these are challenged in the courts. They must reflect the benefit to the property being assessed, and that's directly tied, hey, is the cost of X improving the property this much, and so therefore it benefits by X dollars. The assessments must be proportional to the benefit. Therefore, if you have, simple terms, if you have a bigger piece of property or get more benefit, then what you may pay should be proportional to someone that may get a less benefit. Again, that's subjective, but that's one thing that needs to be held up or proven out as you develop your assessments. It must be consistently applied. So once you establish a policy and you move those forward on that particular project, they have to be applied consistently. Can't treat different people different ways. And that's really important for cities that take on long-term street assessments. I can tell you the city of Adel, it's now a town of about 6,500 people. They have used street assessments for every street project they've done probably for the last 40 years that I know about. So everybody in town has paid an assessment at one point or another when their streets are fixed. And so as they've done those assessments, they have been consistently applied from project to project. They've actually changed their assessment methodology along the way, but that methodology is still consistently applied. And at the end of the day, it's got to be fair and reasonable. Again, that's subjective, but certainly something to keep in mind as you move these things forward. What can be assessed? So when we look at roadway projects, there's a public portion of those roads, which includes the streets themselves, storm sewer or drainage improvements that are a part of the roadway. Sanitary sewer and water mains can also be assessed. Those are also public improvements that can be assessed. And then private infrastructure improvements. This is another advantage, if there is such a thing, to assessments, and that is sidewalks on private property, driveways and driveway approaches, and utility service lines. Oftentimes when you get into fixing a street, if the street is bad, there's a good chance the adjacent driveway apron may be bad. And so if the property owner or the city elects to fix the driveway approach and pave that as part of the project, then the cost of that, rather than the property owner having to write a check for that, could elect to have that put on their assessment. And you'll see in a minute, assessments can be paid over a 10 or a 15-year period. So it does help the private property owner in that example spread those costs over a longer period of time. So anyway, those are the things that can be assessed when we talk about streets. And then all the related costs, engineering costs, legal, financing, and administrative costs. So those are the things that can be assessed as part of a street project, and you'll see some examples of that here in just a minute. So when we talk about how do you go about assessing or creating an assessment policy, a couple different ways to do it. By law, the city council can just, first of all, if they decide they want to do assessments, city council can develop the policies by themselves, work with their engineer, their attorney, the fiscal consultant, and actually put together the assessment methodology to be used and applied to that project. And again, in potentially setting a precedent here, as this is being the first project like this coming out of the ground, you're going to be very cautious to make sure that the policy set for this project, this first project, is probably going to set the stage for several other projects to come. But it can certainly be done right here at the council table, and it can move forward. Now, the other thing that can be done, and we've actually done this a lot more in the last probably 15 or 20 years, and that is, depending on the council, if they'd like to, they can create something like a public input committee or a steering committee or a resource group made up of a cross-section of people in the community that we can work with in a workshop setting much like this in much more detail, educate that group on public finance, how streets are improved, how they're financed and so forth, and take that group of citizens and have them help formulate the policy, and so that policy is developed across the entire community. We would suggest if you did that, certain people that would sit on that committee certainly would be the Adams Street, some residents from Adams Street. If you've got other streets slated in the next several years, you might pick a couple of citizens, ask for volunteers on those streets. We'd also suggest you maybe get someone from the school district, maybe some commercial property owners, big and small property owners, and also just residential citizens that may not be impacted by assessments for the long term. Just to get a cross-section of people. Oftentimes we've used anywhere from 15 to 25 people on a committee like that, and we can work with them over a series of workshops, 3 to 5 workshops, to formulate those ideas, and then that committee would bring those policy recommendations back to the city council. They ultimately have the decision, and then those policies can be set. So that's another way in which to get from where you're at today to potentially where you might be if you decide to move down the road for assessments. Real quick, any questions on that process? By the way, that process will certainly, if you take that process, it will certainly take time. It could be anywhere from 1 to 6 months, depending on the complexity of how deep you want to get into.
Back on the last, we were talking about the 10 and 15 year is that a policy that the council develops, or can the property owner elect to do that on their own, irregardless of the policy?
Yeah, the code allows the city council to decide when you do an assessment, do you want to give the property owners a 10 or up, you can go up to 15 years to levy your assessments. So let's say if a property owner is being assessed, say $5,000, that $5,000 could be paid for over a 10-year period or up to a 15-year period, depending on what the council or your citizens tell you to establish as your policy. But the code allows those to go, the Iowa code allows you to spread those as long as 15 years.
So that has to be set up, I'm sorry, that has to be set up before the assessment is done.
Yes, let's back up there a minute. Yes, yeah, you would want to know that up front. When you notify
Homeowner A, homeowner B, homeowner C, they would all have the same time frame. It's not, we want to do it 10, we want to do it 12, we want to do it 15.
If you said, hey, we'll give everybody 15 years to pay it, as a homeowner, if they wanted to come in and write a check for the whole thing up front, they could.
They could do that. They could prepay it too.
Yeah, you could prepay. You pay your assessments at the same time you pay your property taxes twice a year. So at any time you pay your property taxes, you can choose to pay all or a portion of that assessment.
Does that
But they
include
do
the
all
interest?
have to be paid at least in 15 years. I'm sorry.
That includes the interest then?
Yes.
At what rate?
That's another advantage of assessments, if there is such a thing. Because the city would finance the improvements, they typically can do it, they will do it at city finance rates, which your fiscal consultant is telling you is less than 2% today.
Our last bond was under 1%.
Yeah, 1%.
1.7% was our last interest rate.
Yeah, so if, for
What do I
example,
pay then?
pardon me?
What do I pay then?
Yeah, well, the city can choose to pass on the interest cost. They have to charge at least the interest that they're paying on the bonds. And by code, I believe they can go up, they can add a little bit to that interest. I'm not sure what it is, but they have to at least charge the interest that they're charged on the bonds.
The newspaper quoted you, Mike, as saying 9%.
That's the maximum.
That's the maximum.
It's still an astronomical amount.
Yeah.
And it's, we're throwing around great big subjective numbers here.
Yeah.
And sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, well.
Does that assessment stay with the current homeowner if that homeowner moves and they say 15 years stays with them, right? So if you owe me $20,000 and I say I'm gonna opt into this 15-year deal and I move to West Street, I'm still responsible, right? It doesn't stay with the house, it stays with the person.
No, the assessment stays with the property, and upon sale of the property, assessments have to be paid.
Right, I'm still responsible for it.
Yeah, the property owner that sells the property, it's got to be satisfied at the time the property changes ownership.
So everybody on Adams Street is gonna move in the next 6 months.
Nobody's decided that we're even going to have an
I'm
assessment.
just telling you what's gonna happen. Like,
We haven't gotten to that point that we're going to even decide to do this.
we've already gotten to that point where everybody's gonna move. Just letting you know when assessments are happening, just letting you know where we're going.
Okay, so somebody asked the question at the last meeting about tax deductibility on assessments. So I did some research. I put a little blurb in here that my accountant gave me off the tax code. So in round terms, yes, it appears that they can be deducted if it's a repair, they can be deducted on your taxes, just like your property taxes can be. If you itemize your deductions and so forth. So with that, I'm going to stop and we're going to go through the actual scenarios. Now, here's what we've done. I'll say it again. I'll say it a million times tonight. No decisions have been made. The purpose of us being here tonight is to do nothing more than to illustrate two different concepts. Actually, we can talk about others, but we're going to illustrate a couple of concepts that cities have used on street assessments, and I think starts to formulate the concept and the impact that it could have on property owners. So nobody's made a decision, nobody needs to move, we're just here to have a conversation. I think after tonight, what I would suggest is just take the information, and then obviously the council needs to decide if you even want to move forward with the assessment. So Cody is gonna take this. You want to sit over here too?
Yeah, I'm here too.
Make sure the green lights are.
I don't think we have handouts on all of this.
Do you have that in the packet?
This is the one you got.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna come back to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's all the beginning. Oh, you have it already.
There you go.
Perfect. Thanks, Laura. Okay, so we put together 3 separate scenarios for assessments tonight, and essentially looked to encapsulate kind of the high side of a potential assessment, and then the lower end, and then the third scenario being more of the private infrastructure that Terry alluded to earlier. So scenario 1 here is indicative of a typical residential street.
We're having technicals, so now put going to my computer.
Switching computers. There it comes.
There we go. There you go.
Oh, yeah, they're, oh, perfect. Well, you're-
Okay, excellent.
Go ahead.
Yep. And so what we did is the typical section proposed on Adams Street is currently set to 31 feet back to back and 8-inch PCC paving with modified subbase and 12 inches of subgrade preparation, so compacted soil. When we put our assessment together, this first concept, we looked at what a typical residential street section that a developer would be held to in town would adhere to. So 28-foot back-to-back, PC concrete, 7 inches thick, with a 12-inch subgrade preparation underneath that. And then additionally to that, we wanted to encapsulate the drainage improvements necessary for that roadway too. So the scenario 1 encapsulates a 28-foot back-to-back, 7-inch concrete, 12-inch subgrade with storm sewer.
Let me just point this out. So what you're looking at here is maybe kind of hard to see, but the street that's proposed is 31 feet wide, back to back, to facilitate the traffic. Typically, when we do assessments, we just, as Cody said, we one option is to look at what would a private developer pay? What is the standard city street? And it happens to be 28 feet. That's current standard city street. So that's all we're going to, in this scenario, that's all that we've calculated to be assessable cost. In other words, the extra 3 feet of pavement is non-assessable, that gets paid for by the entire city and not assessed to the private property owner. In addition to that, as Cody said, the subgrade required to support that pavement, along with basic standard drainage, storm sewer, is also being calculated in the assessable cost in this, what we're calling scenario 1.
Can I add one more thing too, is our typical road, correct me if I'm wrong, is 7 inches, where this is 8 inches, and that because of the load of Adams Street with the school, that extra inch would not be assessed to the property owners. And then additionally, we have an additional 6-inch modified subgrade that would typically not be required, but again, because of the loads that the school has and the busing, that is needed, but would not be assessed to the property owners. So again, just a typical residential style street is what in this scenario would be assessed.
Yep.
So the next 3 pages essentially go through the corridor and highlight those accessible portions with the street. And then we show at the intersections, basically terminating at the side lot line. at all the various intersections through the corridor.
Yeah, so in other words, in the intersections, that is not being calculated in this scenario for us to be assessed. It's only the 28-foot street, 7 inches thick, only from property line to property line at each street. Here, there is property on this side, so this half would get assessed, and this half would not. Here, none of that intersection is being assessed. So it's just the pavement in front of private property.
And you can flip through those, Mike. Yep, okay. Okay, so that kind of summarizes scenario one, and we'll look at the financial impact once we get through these other two scenarios. Scenario two, so this is at kind of the low end of the assessment. This is assessing for the 2.5-foot curb and gutter section on either side of the street with the underlane subgrade prep, which extends out 3 foot beyond, which is a typical design standard to accommodate paving machine as it goes through the corridor. Similarly, the assessment is based off a 7-inch thickness, where Adams Street is currently proposed as 8, and then the 12-inch subgrade. And then the following no storm sewer on this one, thanks, Terry. The following 3 sheets show that graphically, with the 30 inches being hatched out along the corridor, excluding intersections. And then the final scenario we ran for you tonight is the private infrastructure assessment items. So as Terry alluded in his slides, the sidewalk, the driveway approaches, and then the water and sewer connections on either side of the main to be assessed. This would not include any of the street improvements, any of the main for the sanitary sewer, any of the main for the storm sewer, or any of the main for the water.
This is one advantage while we're on the private stuff. Let's say, for example, if this is your water, here's a water main in our little drawing. If you have a lead water service from the water main up to your house, do those exist in town? Okay. So if the city made the decision that they were going to replace any of those lead water mains while the street's getting fixed, so we don't have to come back a few years later and cut the street out, the city could choose, this could be a policy, whereby they would replace that water main or that water service line as a portion of the project. And rather than the private property owner paying 100% of that cost, which is typically probably the case now. So if you have a water service here and it breaks, you have 100% of the cost to go out and replace that, fix the street and so forth. The beauty of doing it with a project like this is the city can do that as part of the project. Typically that'll yield a lower cost. And then they could put, if they chose, they could put the cost of that onto your assessment and give you the 10 or 15 years to pay that back, financed at city rates. So that's one beauty of.
And one comment on the lead service pipes in particular too is EPA has regulations that are working through that are going to require all those lead service pipes to be replaced. And those are property owners' responsibility. The services are not city's property, it's actually the property owners. And we have, is it 2/3 of the service pipes we believe are lead on this corridor? So, I mean, there is a substantial number of lead services that are gonna have to be replaced. And then it becomes the question of, do you replace them now when we're tearing up the street? Or do you wait and tear up the street again and have a whole bunch of patches if you can't get to the main? So, these are some of the questions in policy decisions, even outside of special assessments, that we're going to have discussions about how do we handle those.
Those aren't things that EPA is requiring right now to be done, right? I mean, that's not a EPA requirement where they're coming and saying that right now, do this.
So the EPA in larger cities is requiring it right now.
But this isn't a larger city.
Well,
so right now, I'm asking right now, here in Carroll, is the EPA knocking on the door saying, let's get these
there's
replaced?
a schedule on when they're going to have to be replaced. So that's what we have to
now.
Well, we know, again, if we know it's gonna happen in 3 years, why would we not start having that conversation now?
I understand to have the conversation. I'm just asking, are they demanding it right now?
Today, it's not.
Okay, thank you.
So the policy could be, the city could say, if they're working, we don't have to fix them. If we don't fix them as part of the project, when you do have to fix them, 100% of the cost may be on the property owner, plus the cost to tear out the street and fix that later. And I think, so that's what council needs to wrestle with, because do we want patches within 5 years on a brand new paved street? So that's a tough thing to wrestle with, but again, those are some of the decisions the council have to place. Do you have much Orangeburg sanitary sewer services here in town?
There is some in town.
Any on Adams Street you know of, or?
We have not inventoried that yet.
Okay.
There's some.
We've identified some.
Okay, Orangeburg used to be a quite heavily used sanitary sewer service line. And many of those have collapsed. So if your sanitary sewer line going from your house into the sanitary sewer is made of Orangeburg, and if it hasn't collapsed yet, you may not have to fix it for a long time. But if it is Orangeburg and the city decides, if the policy is such that the council would go ahead and fix those as part of the street project, again, you could get that fixed at the time of the project and have up to 15 years to pay that off as well.
Can you explain Orangeburg so people understand what that is?
I don't really know what it is, but I know it was put in heavily, I think, in the 30s, 40s, maybe even the 50s. It's I want to say it's kind of a cardboard type. That's probably the best way to say it. It's a cardboard type. It was very inexpensive at the time they installed it, and it was put in a lot in the houses back in that time frame. And a lot of them have collapsed. A lot of them will collapse. And so it's just a function of probably time.
Do you guys know, you guys been doing some survey and stuff on that street already for a couple weeks now. Do you know where the Orangeburg is at right now?
Well, we're still getting the reporting back from the televising that was done, but we'll have an idea once.
So you'll be able to assess everybody's property separate with what they have underground to their houses?
We'll be able to make a determination of what everybody has.
So you're saying wherever there's Orangeburg, you guys are probably going to say, we need to replace that.
We haven't made that decision, but the question becomes what makes sense.
It would be a wise decision.
That's the way we maybe view it.
We haven't seen all the data yet from the city side. I think they just started it last week, if I'm not mistaken.
Just wrapped up last week, yeah.
I think the day you and I met out here, they just were getting it started, so.
So you'll be able to tell what's underneath the ground for everybody's property. You'll have an idea what's there and what's going to be replaced.
And would we be able to contact each of the property owners and tell them exactly, or have the property owners contact you somehow or another when it's all said and done?
Yeah, the project schedule has a public information meetings at various junctures through the design process. And so when we get to those, we can have all those records available and have individual property owner discussions at that time.
So are you thinking about widening this street up here? Or is it as wide as it's going to be now? Or is it
It's essentially as wide as it would be in the proposal, yes.
So it'd just be the width that it is right now?
I think it narrows right there at 13th Street, doesn't it?
So I've poured a new driveway in the last probably 10 years. My approach, or apron, you called it, there's nothing wrong with it. So do you just leave it alone?
Typically, what we would recommend, again, these are policy decisions, but if it's in good shape and doesn't need to be replaced, there's a chance that some of it's got to come out in order to facilitate building the new street. And so that would typically, our recommendation would be that would be replaced as part of the overall project cost and not assessed to the property owner. We have had projects where the whole driveway, all the way back to the garage, is in bad shape. And if a private property owner petitions the council to have their entire driveway replaced as part of the project, that can be done, and that cost can be assessed over the 10 or 15-year period. That gets a little complicated. There's only 11 of those, I think, on this project of driveways. But I mean, that's the flexibility you do have with special assessments. So there are some advantages, but typically if it's a pretty good driveway approach, probably would recommend just replacing it and not charging it back. Because it doesn't need to be replaced in that scenario.
If you didn't have the Orangeburg or lead water mains, would they be, suppose if somebody's were updated, would you be assessed then or not? Is it all one sort of district or is it?
I think if you have it, you want it replaced, then you do it. But if you don't have it, you wouldn't have to be assessed for it. That's what I would assume.
So does it become voluntary then? I mean, by the property owner?
Yeah, these are all policies.
I mean, one property owner might have Orangeburg and the other one does too, but one says, you know what, I'm not gonna take my chances, I want it done. Whereas the other one says, not me. Can they voluntarily be assessed?
They could, but the decision the council will have to make is, does the city want to take the risk of having that fail within a few years? And
then the street thing, yeah, I
Yes,
get that.
yes.
Yeah, I totally
That's all,
understand that, but.
Yep.
But.
So the council would probably have to make a policy that if you have it, change it. And you can just get the special assessment.
Yeah, I get that part, but I just, as far as for their benefit.
Policy that everybody's got to.
Sometimes it's not 100% voluntary because somebody's going to make a decision that it's got to be done as part of the project.
And I know we've talked a lot about Orangeburg, but one item too that I think we need to talk about is, I don't know where we're at on surveying the existing services, but do we have any services that maybe are not Orangeburg but appear to be failing?
There are cases of collapsed pipe, lateral pipe, sewer pipe, sewer service pipe within the corridor, yeah.
Are we televising all the service lines?
As many as we can get into.
Okay.
So that's going to be another issue that we have to deal with, because you certainly will have some services that are collapsing. They're showing failure, but they haven't failed yet. And so from a homeowner, we know, again, that's under the pavement. So do we say, no, we want this replaced now because a failure is going to happen at some point because of the condition it's in? And that's going to be a policy decision that the council's going to have to make ultimately.
Anytime we do street total reconstruction, streets are a three-dimensional beast. We have the street, we have water and sewer and utilities underneath there. And so it's only wise to look at the whole street. If you're gonna go spend millions of dollars to fix the street, look at everything that's under there, get the best condition of what's there, and then make the right decision in terms of what needs to be replaced going forward. You're spending a lot of money. You don't want to have to come back and do a bunch of stuff later.
You have a question? What's your name? I'm sorry.
Randy Toff.
Randy, okay.
I live catty corner across the intersection.
Well, I just don't want to keep saying, hey, you, you have another question, I can say, hey, Randy. Okay.
I actually have two.
Yeah, go ahead, Randy.
So one, there's off-street parking on the 700 block. Is there any plans for that to be addressed?
Typically, well, again, it's a policy, but now, typically, if it's there and if it's in good condition and doesn't need to be replaced, we would only replace what needs to facilitate the paving. We'd recommend that probably not get assessed. If it's serving a private property or a school, oftentimes we've seen this with schools, we would assess that parking that's benefiting that property back to that property. So that could be a little nuance in the assessment. That cost would not be paid for by the rest of the city if it's there to benefit a private property. But it could, again, the policy could be, I will just throw it in and we won't assess it.
So
that's a nuance.
Yeah, in particular to that parking, and Cody had alluded to that we're going to have a neighborhood information meeting as we get the plans developed. So that's a step. There'll be a couple of those yet to occur. But on the 700 block of Adams Street right now, the plan direction is there would be no on-street parking similar today. It would be the similar cross-section you see north, like on 800 block. So that's at least how the plans are being developed at this point. And we'll have discussions with the neighborhood, and the question is the condition of it now is likely it needs to be replaced. And then the question is who pays for it, the property owner adjacent that benefits from it, or the community as a whole.
So secondly, we're worried about under the street and access to utilities. Can't you just do the utilities to the edge of the street and call it a day? And then the rest can be dictated or approached as necessary?
And that certainly is one option. Now, one question becomes, if you're going to disrupt half a sewer service or half a water service, do you just stop with the half? Or do you?
Am I not obligated from the stop to the house anyway?
You're obligated from the main, wherever that is, to your house, not from the water stop.
This drawing, I'm sorry, let me explain this drawing a little better. Randy, this drawing is not clear. Right here's what we're showing is the right of way. So your house would actually sit clear back here. So what we're showing here is these are the services virtually underneath the street to the back of the sidewalk or the right of way. So that's the portion that we're really worried about, protecting the street. But again, a policy could be if the property owner wants to have that whole service replaced back to their house, that could be done as part of the project. So I probably wasn't clear in terms of what the drawing was illustrating, so apologize for that.
So going back to replacing some of this stuff on your own property, if you guys deem it necessary that inevitably your line is going to collapse, is that some of the costs that can be put back on the city, or going to be 100% the homeowner? Got a tree in the way, you got to remove the tree. Sidewalks, got to tear up sidewalks. What sort of costs are we looking for the homeowners to probably have to pay?
Good question. Yeah, Cody's going to cover that right now. We're going to give you just a general idea of what that might mean based on what we just talked about here.
Yeah, great segue. Next slide, Mike. There you go. Okay, so this is hard to read, and I apologize, but if we scroll down kind of into the bowl, across these columns, essentially the leftmost column, the item number there, that essentially is a breakdown of the corridor in its entirety. So driveway items, sidewalk items, the street items, and then all the subsequent work underneath. Assign a unit price, which at this point is our best guess at what a contractor would come in and bid at the time of letting. And then across the columns on the right, so kind of right in the middle is project totals, including utilities. So this would be a full reconstruct, including sanitary sewer, storm sewer, and water main, if the assessments come back that those are all in need of replacement.
Just what is that number if all of it was needed?
So total construction cost of that item, of that column is 3.5 million. With engineering legal, 4.2 million is what that total project cost entails. Next column over to the right is same project without sanitary sewer, without water main, if assessments have deemed that those are in serviceable condition and can stay in place. Total construction cost for that line item is 2.7 million, with a total cost of 3.2 million after legal and engineering. And then the far right three columns here, so think back to the assessment scenarios we ran through at the intro. So scenario one, which was your 28-foot paving, 7-inch thick with subgrade and storm sewer. The total assessable cost with that scenario one, including engineering and legal, is just over $1 million, 1.08 million, which leaves a non-assessable portion, which would be the city portion in this case. And for our discussion tonight, I've excluded the sanitary and water main from these non-assessable portions and percentages of assessable. So the city would pick up $2.1 million in that scenario, which results in a 33.4% project cost being assessed back to the properties. Scenario 2, which was just the 2.5 feet curb and gutter section with the subgrade, no storm sewer in this scenario. Total assessable cost for this scenario was $110,000. So the city would pick up $3.1 million, which gives 3.1% of assessable cost. So as you remember, we looked to kind of encapsulate the high side of the assessment and then the low side. So obviously scenario 2 is kind of the low side. And then scenario 3, which is all the private infrastructure through the corridor with legal and engineering, $421,000 of assessable cost in the project, with a city portion of $2.8 million in this scenario, which leads to a 13% assessable cost to the homeowner. And then last page in your packet. So this essentially breaks down those 3 scenarios further and shows what each one of the properties through the corridor would see in assessable costs, with a couple different looks at schedule on these. So the top column is the scenario 1 again, 28-foot paving.
Can you pull that up a little bit? Is anybody here with the bank or with the, okay, all right, well, we got you on here too. All right, you can't probably blow it up too much, but.
Yeah, so across the top, you see the typical residential lot. So we tried to just take a representative lot through the corridor and then kind of assign that across. So there's 2 typical residential lot frontages within the corridor, 50-foot frontage and a 66-foot frontage. Iowa Networks building at the south end of the project corridor has a 132-foot frontage. Avail Bank has a 329-foot frontage across the street. And then at the north side of the project, Adams Elementary has a 541-foot frontage. So as we run through these scenarios, essentially what the assessment does is take that lot width and then assign that cost back to a representative lot width in the corridor. So if the city so chooses to move into special assessments, these will be more specialized to each one of the individual lots, but this kind of gives a general concept of what those assessment costs would be. So scenario 1 again, took that total assessment value, which back to the previous sheet here was that $1.08 million in assessment, and distributed that amongst all the lots within the corridor. So in the case of a 50-foot frontage, that's a $12,000 assessment, and then so on across the lots. The columns there, a 66-foot lot is $15,853, and so on. And then we've broken those costs into a 10-year repayment schedule and assume a 3% interest rate, which we've seen the city's interest rate is considerably lower than that. But for conceptual purposes, we've used a 3% interest rate. And then also looked at a 15-year schedule with the same 3% interest rate. And again, at policy that year, it could be anything up to 15 and less. Interest rates up to 9% and less, down to the bond value of the city. So as you look at that 50-foot lot frontage, if you consider a 10-year repayment schedule with that 3% interest rate, your bump to your semi-annual property tax payment would be $704 in the 10-year scenario. And in the 15-year repayment schedule, your 6-month bump to your property tax value would be $503. And you can carry those columns across and see what each one of those would mean for the various lot frontages. Similarly, with scenario 2, those very same here. The approximate assessment is that total value of assessment, the $110,000 divided out amongst all the lot frontage, 10-year, 15-year schedule, 3% interest rate. And then lastly, scenario 3, which is a little different here, as there are residents within the corridor that don't have the driveway directly connecting to Adams Street. I've taken it and looked at a case where it would have the driveway approach on Adams Street, and then include sidewalk, include your sanitary sewer stub, include your water service stub. So for a 50-foot lot frontage, that total assessed value comes out to $12,800 approximately. And you can see what those repayment schedules look like over a 10 and 15-year window. Reason for the different total on scenario 3, if you take that total value, which was provided on the previous table, $421,000, that doesn't quite accurately depict a resident with a driveway on Adams Street, as those costs get divided out amongst all 55 lots, where it would be more specialized and more unique to a resident with a driveway off Adams. That'll open it up for city comment. Questions, comments?
There's only 11 driveways on Adams, is that what you said?
There's approximately 30, Ryan.
Did you say 11 earlier?
I said that, I was wrong. Yeah, I thought I had heard that somewhere.
Okay.
30, I'm sorry.
What about trees in the right of way?
Yeah, typically, well, you try to save them. If they're good trees and if they're alive, they're good, you want to save them, I'm assuming. But if they have to come out, typically that's not assessed. It's generally just a part of the project cost. Again, that's a policy that can be chosen if they do have to be torn down for some reason to facilitate construction. I've seen cities replace them at city cost, or they can be assessed. So all that can be negotiated and discussed as you lay out a policy.
I don't think we can plant trees in our right of ways like on Adams Street here, can we?
Yeah, you may have a policy to get away from it in the right of way. I don't know if you do it.
I think that's a city policy, is that right?
That's the current policy, correct?
Let me just talk a little bit about how assessments actually get put in place. Okay, so again, the council, as you see, they're at the very beginning stages of talking about this. So there are no policies. Somebody's got to figure out, first of all, if you want to even assess. Does it make sense for the city of Carroll to include assessments in the way in which you're going to pay for streets going forward? If the answer to that is no, very simple, we move on, start the project. 100% of all these costs will get borne by the entire city every time you do a project, unless you implement assessments sometime in the future. And that's why it's a big decision right now, because the council probably is setting some precedent as to how to move forward. Now, if the decision is to move forward with assessments, as I mentioned before on the other slide, city council has the right and the authority to develop the policy as they see fit, and they can move forward with that. Or they can make it a much more public input process, just like we're having a discussion tonight. And we can beat all these issues around until we all come up with what we think is fair and reasonable. So let's say that that's the direction they go, and a few months from now, everybody's kind of agreeing that it's the right thing to do, and you've all developed the right policy for the city. In order to levy assessments, what has to happen is the city, once the policy is decided, notices have to be sent when the engineer gets to the point where he can estimate the assessment value. Notices are then sent out to the property owners, notifying you that there is a preliminary assessment schedule on file, and that your preliminary assessment is X, whatever that dollar amount is. Once that letter goes out, that assessment dollar cannot go up. It can only go down. So the burden is on the engineer to make sure that that number is as close to accurate as possible. Then the project goes out for bid, it gets constructed, no payments or assessments are made. The project gets complete. Once it's complete, then the city will certify the final assessments. You as a property owner would then be notified of what your final assessment is. And again, it can't be any more than the preliminary assessment. So once you're notified, the next time you pay your property, well, you can come in at any time and pay that off to the county. The county is the one that actually levies the assessment. You could come in the day you get notified if you would like and pay your assessment off in full. Otherwise, if you choose not to pay it, it will just get added onto your property taxes and will be a part of your property tax payment every 6 months when you pay your property taxes. So if, just in timing, if the city decides to go through an assessment process, you're probably bidding the project, I'm going to suggest maybe mid to late summer of next year, depending on how you go about establishing the policy. And if it took the rest of next year and maybe even part of the next year to complete the project, we'd probably be 18 months at the soonest as to when you would ever be notified of your final assessment. And then you would have typically till the next payment on your taxes. So you're probably close to 18 months at the soonest and probably more like 2 years away from ever having to pay an assessment if you do assess. So that's kind of the timing of it. And then again, depending on the timing that you get 10 or 15 years or whatever it is you decide. So it is out there, Wade. It's not something that's going to happen this year in terms of.
But your assessment, your assessment goes up if you opt to fix my sewer line or, so it goes up then, right? So contractor comes in and convinces the homeowner, like, hey, you've got to get this done. It's bad. So contractor is now telling the homeowner get it done, or you decide the trees have to be removed to get it done. So then the assessment does get higher or different, or the sidewalks.
No, all of those decisions in terms of what you're going to be assessed have to be made before you're notified of your preliminary assessment. It cannot go up after that.
Well, you said didn't you not say there was an option?
That would be decided. So good question. Let's walk through it. So let's say the city decides to assess and they decide to allow you to put the water main, your water service line on your assessment. If they deem that you've got a lead water service and they deem that they're going to replace it as part of this, and let's say that's $1,000 for that water service, and your street assessment is $10,000, when you're notified of your assessment, you're going to be notified of the total. Now, once that's set by the city, cannot go up. If during construction, you decide you want to replace the rest of your water line all the way back to your house, you could probably come in and petition to have that done as part of the project, and that could be added to your assessment, but it can't be added by the city once you're notified of that assessment.
Right, that makes sense. That's what I was asking. But a contractor could tell you this needs to be done, convincing homeowners.
Once you're outside of the right of way, the city, frankly, it's up to you. It's up to the private property.
You've never dealt with crooked contractors, have you? Trying to make money on big projects like this, have you?
I've only been in business 42 years, so you can take it. I used to have hair when I started too. So I've seen about all of it.
All right, just asking, because we all want to know.
It gets complicated. We've done it, but it gets complicated when you start having a public contractor work on private property. It can be done, but there's other steps you have to go through. I'm just trying to explain how the assessment piece works in that scenario.
So private contractors will be able to come in and do a water line, a lead water line replacement if they do choose to do that.
It would, if it's done as part of the city project, most likely it would be with the contractor that the city has going on private property.
So they're talking about the lead, removing lead water lines down the future for future projects. EPA puts that in. How soon does the city have to react and fix those problems? And what's the repercussion if they don't?
Those are all great questions, because some of the repercussion questions haven't all come out. And Randy may be in a better position, but some of the interesting things that are happening with these lead service lines is there are some communities, because they're now required to get them converted, are required to provide ways to filtrate the water at the home until they do get replaced. But ultimately, that service line is the homeowner's responsibility. And so I think some of those things are going to have to be decided on. We're going to need more guidance on exactly how the EPA is going to approach the situation. And frankly, these have been regulations that have been long in the works. You know, a lot of it coming out of Flint, Michigan, with the water issues that they're having in their drinking water systems. So I think a lot of it is yet to be understood. But the services in Carroll, in every community it's different, but in Carroll, they're the owner's responsibility. That's how it is in our ordinance. And so if you have a break on your service line, we've seen it where there's a stop box and water's bubbling up. Well, the owner has to take care of that. It's not a city responsibility.
So let's say that the city decides to replace the line. You'd set back to the back of the right of the way, right?
Right, yep.
Is where the city would go to. At that point, it's the homeowners. So Ryan, is your point that the crooked contractor that the city retains says, hey, Ryan, your water line sucks and you have to replace it, right? So we don't tell him that he has to replace his line back. That's his option. And if he doesn't believe our contractor, you can get your own people to look at it and decide from the right of way back. Is that, am I understanding that correct?
Or they can just leave it alone if they want, as long as it's working.
Right.
I understand.
But if he gets his contractors to prove that it is lead, his contractor does not do the work. It's a city contractor.
That makes it easier because of the way it gets assessed. There would be another way. This would be complicated because you're gonna have 10 different 10 different contractors work on 10 different deals, and trying to assess all that, it gets really complicated. But let's just say that from the right of way back to the house is totally voluntary typically by the property owner. If you want to include that in the assessment, then it's probably needs to be done as part of the contract led by the city.
And then the homeowner can decide whether or not they want to do it.
Correct.
Instead of paying $5,000 to have it done up front, you could pay $5,000 over 15 years.
Correct.
Unfortunately, the city retains good records where we have a good idea of what the lead, the homes with the lead service lines through the corridor are. So we can have those meetings once we get into the public information sessions to see what the homeowner's desires would be beyond right of way.
That's called a petition and waiver. You'll hear that term if this moves forward. If the private property owner wants to do something that's not being forced on you by the city and include that in your assessment, then you can petition the city to have that added to your assessment, and you waive your rights to object to have that done. So that is a benefit to the property owner if they choose to do it.
And certainly, especially in lead service pipes, there is, for the most of the corridor, the water main is actually in the grass parking area. So there is a possibility that a decision could be made. We're not going to replace that homeowner. They could get to it without disrupting the street. Part of the discussion item or discussion that needs to be in it, obviously, if you're ripping up the street, it's a little bit cheaper to open trench a new service line versus we're going to want a directional bore under the street because we're not, again, want to disrupt that new paving. You know, so it becomes a question for the homeowner of, do you want to wait and maybe the EPA never has a regulation that comes down and says they have to be done, or, and by the way, I think they will, but that's my bet.
I believe they will.
But, you know, the question becomes, do you want to wait and then just directional bore? Because that's going to be a higher cost than open trench. So, I mean, these are hard decisions to make. Yeah.
What side is the water main on? Just kind of let them know if they would have to bore or not.
I think it's generally the east side in this corridor.
Most of it's on the east.
So if you live on the west side, then you had to replace it or opt it out to, then you'd have to bore.
And we'll have more, once the camera stuff's all done, we'll be able to give you guys all the information.
So the camera doesn't go down the water, it just goes down the sewer.
Sewer.
You got doubt.
So how do you know which properties have lead, Randy? You just have the records from when it was put in?
We have pretty good records.
So you could notify the homeowners. of those records.
Houses are always crap.
Terry, you mentioned an engineering cost to determine his assessment prices for everyone. So a project of this nature, what's that gonna, what do you think it would cost just for the engineering to figure this out? In other words, we're gonna lose some money to the engineering expenses if we do this. How much?
Well, again, that's a good question. If you want us involved in helping you determine the policy, if you
I'm
can,
talking about the price to each of these individuals.
calculating the assessment.
You calculate that generates an expense.
Yeah, we have
If
that.
we have no assessments at all, we don't have to pay that.
Right.
How much what are we talking about? 100,000, 200?
No, we have that in our contract already.
Okay.
Yeah,
What is it? Do you know, remember what?
yeah, I think the assessment portion was 13,000.
Okay.
Yeah, if you choose not to
This
assess.
instead of that.
Yes, yeah, yeah. What you see in the costs there, Jerry, are very conceptual in nature based off of percentage. Yeah, so we've got that number established already.
Perfect, thank you.
Jerry, the question I thought you were asking is if you go through a policy setting process and you want us to help facilitate the work sessions, I was trying to estimate, if you can tell me how many work sessions we have, I can really tell you how much it would
No,
cost.
it's completely
But
different.
I would say it could be as little as zero if you don't assess, and it could get up to $20,000 to $30,000 if we had to conduct a bunch of workshops and public input.
I just don't want to collect $1 million from people that live on Adams Street and have you guys charge us $900,000 to decide how much they.
Why not? Hey, I've got one last sheet if I could. Can you show this one? It's attached to the thing I just wanted to illustrate. to the
You have
council.
that one.
Oh,
That was, yeah,
yeah,
that was years.
It's in your packet too. Yeah, ready to go.
So, this assessment deal, is this the only type of assessment available as an option?
I think you have to narrow that question down,
Yeah.
Mr. Harris, please.
What do you mean, Randy?
Well, is there a whole city assessment that can be involved in it or what?
Well, if you're talking about these scenarios, there's all kinds of ways the policy could be established. For example, the city could take 100% of the project cost. Probably wouldn't be a very good idea, and assess it to the adjacent property owners. They could take half of what we're showing here on scenario one and assess that to the property owner. So there's a million different ways you can choose to assess. The basic premise has to be tied back to benefit. It's got to be proportional, because when we take these on, we assume they may be challenged in the courts, and these are what the courts say. If it's beneficial to the property, is it proportional, is it fair and reasonable and consistently applied? If we meet those tests, the courts have usually upheld that that they're legal.
Randy, are you asking if it could be assessed across all the property owners?
Right, yeah.
We just do that with property tax.
Yeah, a geo bond, no, there's other assessments that can be done. A frontage assessment can be used.
That's basically what we've calculated here.
No, it's a frontage assessment for all properties.
So if the project hasn't been done on the street, doesn't matter, you assess it. What part of the project are you trying to assess to? And I'm confused.
I got some questions that might lead to his too. What's the end game here? We got 64 miles to replace. Do we say we want all these done in 20 years? Then, next question is, if we're the guinea pigs, we're the first ones that look like we're gonna have something done. And we're going through all this stuff here, and then you find out that, well, this didn't work so well on Adams Street. Maybe we should do it different on this street. And then maybe their costs are lower than our costs. Then why should we have to pay for something that wasn't figured out in the beginning? And instead of just the Adams Street people paying for it, one of the considerations I think he's saying is, why don't we just say, we're thinking about having all this done in the town over the next 20 years. We're all gonna assess all properties, and it's all gonna be done the same way. And so if something changes in 1 year, it changes everybody's in 1 year. The other thing is, we might be advantageous for cost might be cheaper now for our part than somebody else 19 years down the road. That we might be lucky that way, we might not. So I think you're asking is, why do we have to do it ourselves instead of having everybody else pay for it all at the same time? Is that right, Randy?
My point is, they did Adams Street on the south side of 30, dug the whole thing out, nobody got assessed there. I'm pretty sure I paid for that. So did these other people. So now what's the matter? Why am I getting the chosen one and getting banged for this? I don't get this.
Those are great questions. This might help that. Can you blow that up? I apologize, I didn't realize you have a big crowd here, but you can blow this up as much as we can. And this is in your packet. If you've got a copy of it, it's on the last sheet. This is very, very general, just to kind of illustrate why assessments might make sense. In fact, excuse me, before we show this, will you go back to one of those drawings we had like on scenario 1 and show the aerial drawing of the streets? I know this isn't going to make you feel any better, but I want to give you a little bit of a theory on this. This is what's happened with cities that typically do these assessments. Okay, so while it appears we may be picking on Adams Street, somebody is probably the highest priority street to fix. So if that's the case, when we spread the assessments, we don't just spread it on a frontage, we spread it all the way back to the property. And the reason we do that is typically we'll go 300 feet off of the street because that's been deemed to be benefiting the property, or we go half the distance to the next improvable street. So in this example, this is probably an alley back here. The next approvable street would be down here or up here. Okay, so let's assume 2 years from now, this street down here gets improved. If the policy was to assess like this in scenario 1, then when this project gets done, all of these property owners would get assessed the same as these property owners. But these property owners would not pay when this street is done. They would not pay an assessment. So when you think about that citywide, if you're going to embark on a 50, 100-year, 300-year street improvement program, and this is consistently applied, at some point, everybody in town is going to pay on the same basis of the assessment policy that's put in place. It's just that you guys happen to be first. And so that's what Adele has experienced is that exact thing. They virtually have gone through their entire city. They've applied the formula and everybody pays. The fact that you're early, chances are your assessment's probably going to be less than the guy 5 years from now, just because of construction cost increases. So that's the theory about doing this. And what you brought up, Randy, is the fact that one street was done and nobody got assessed. So why that decision was made, who knows? But is that what we want to do for the rest of the next 50 years as we do this? So what I tried to put together on this last sheet, now if you go to this, is this again gets to some policy decisions. So what I've tried to do here is show approximate impact on the debt service. These guys are charged with managing city debt, okay? And again, their hands are tied on how they can pay for city streets. So they not only have to keep public improvements working, they are limited in how they can pay for certain things. And so, as we talked about before, general obligation debt is the primary way in which to pay for streets. That's not their decision. The state legislature has made that law. So when you look at this, if you look at what the city is contemplating here over the next 15 years, there's 3.2 million of streets to be fixed. This does not include utilities. 5.7 3 years from now, 2.8 million, 3.8. In the next 15 years, there's $18 million, $19 million worth of street work that the city deems needed to be done. That's just a peanut. That's peanuts compared to the rest of the streets that you have in town, but they are programming that process. If assessments were used as we've demonstrated in scenario 1, not made, that decision's not made, roughly $1 million assessed here, 1.9 million assessed here, 1 million here, 92. So in this example of the almost $19 million of street work, there's $6.5 million being assessed to the adjacent property owners. And so what that means is there's non-assessable, about $12.5 million not being assessed. So Randy, back to your point, why not just charge everybody in town? Everybody in town is paying this 12.4 million. The purpose of the assessment is to shift some of this cost to the benefiting property owners. And that gets to the point of, well, why is my street fixed and this guy over here isn't fixed and so forth? Well, that's what assessments do. It shifts the cost of that benefit to that property owner, but there's still, in this example, 60-some% of the total cost is still being borne by the whole city. So if you come down, so I kind of drew a couple of summaries for the council to consider here. If you scroll down to okay. One of the things in looking at what PFM did, PFM is the city's financial advisor. You have, in my opinion, an unusual amount of general debt capacity. You've been very prudent. Your council has been very prudent as how you've issued general obligation debt. You're only about, what, 20-some percent? 13% of your legal capacity is encumbered in general obligation debt. We've seen cities up to 80% of their debt capacity in debt. And some cities will go up to 90 for a short period of time and then drop back to 70 or 80. You only have 13%. So you have a lot of room within your debt capacity limit to do street work. City's been very good about that. But does that mean you just go out and start spending a bunch of general obligation debt? I think the past history of the council has been to manage that general obligation debt very well. In fact, PFM estimates that if you do this without assessments, you're still only encumbering about 30% of your debt. So our conclusion is that debt service capacity does not appear to be a big issue. You've got capacity to take on your program. So if the objective is to keep your general obligation debt and your property tax levy as low as possible from a city standpoint, then assessment scenario 1, which is what we went through, would free up about 3 to 5% of your debt capacity and result in about a 15 to 18% reduction or lowering of your tax levy. And again, these are general assumptions in which PFM has done more detailed calculations. And once the assessment policy, if it's used, is determined, all this could be calculated. I just did some real high-level numbers today. But if the objective then is to also do as many roadway improvements as possible and as fast as you can, you might mention it's 300 and some years. Okay. If you want to try to cut that to 280 years, or maybe cut it to 100 years or 80 years, whatever it might be, using special assessments, you can do more work faster and keep your debt service still in line. In fact, over the course of the next 15 years, just in round numbers, if scenario 1 was used as the assessment methodology, you could do probably 2 more $3 million projects in 15 years. So that's $6.5 million worth of more work without increasing your debt service levy. So the objective is, as we talked about before, is to try to put some financing tools in place that allow you to do more work to keep up with the streets that continue to fail. And then the last thing I've said a million times, is the theory behind assessments is it does shift the cost, not across the entire city, but it does shift the cost, a portion of the cost to those properties that benefit from the improvement.
For just that project.
For that project.
For that project. So as the project rotates through, everybody will end up being assessed.
Yep, in theory.
So we just redid this street probably 6, 7 years ago. Is that somewhere in the ballpark? This was resurfaced probably 6 or 7 years ago.
2008.
2007.
Okay, 14 years ago. So another 15 years, if I still live in this house, you guys decide to resurface that, is that going to be another street assessment tax then?
Nobody can really answer that question, but given current policy, the way we do it, it would be a no.
If we keep it the way we're doing it now, we won't end up paying nothing if you redo it the way it is now. So another 15 years down the road, you decide to repave this street, am I going to get slapped with another tax?
My point being, when we do overlays or repairs, we haven't considered, we've been able to fund that, so can't really answer that question, don't really know, but haven't done it so far.
One of the issues when you do an overlay is the base of the road still has to be stable enough in order to accept the overlay. But if the base, like this road, what's the next one over? That's all, it's eroded so much, you can pour an overlay over it all you want, another year or two, it's gonna collapse, because the base is gone. And that's where we're at with Adams Street. That's why Adams was picked first, because it's the worst one.
I think you get that, you just want to know if you're gonna have 2 special assessments across time.
Yeah, I don't want that. Definitely, I don't want one, but.
Is this Adams Street, by the way?
This is a full depth reconstruction.
Yeah.
It is, so we're expecting a design life of 50 years out of it, before an overlay.
But my question is, so if in 15 years we decide to do an overlay, I'm not gonna have to pay for that.
No, this is constructed so that we don't have to do that in 15 years. You know, last
15 or
time,
20 years, I plan on living here my life, but
last
no,
time
in
we
20 years,
did
I
it,
don't
we
wanna
just
pay for
put
it either.
3 inches of asphalt on it.
Yeah.
And
I
this
don't wanna
project,
pay for that next time it gets done.
this project is full depth reconstruction. So the life of it's going to be much.
It'll be cheaper next time, but I'm not gonna pay for it.
Got the car only one.
No,
Well,
I guess it's a difference between overlay and full depth.
I know, but it's still a cost, or the homeowner's still gonna have to pay for part of that when it gets done.
And they
15,
have,
20 years down the road.
You need 50 years down the road. 50 years, 50 years down the road is when you'd have to look at the overlay. That's what Randy's
Do
saying.
you think this
It's
is gonna last
50.
50 years? This street?
That's the way it's designed, that's the way we're designing it, it's the last 50 years.
Boy, that's funny.
Randy, do we know when was Adam Street poured to begin with?
we don't have real good records, but the best we can find is 1916.
So, see,
In one perspective too, I mean, you can go up to Applewood Knolls. I mean, that neighborhood's 40 to 50 years old. We've not done any overlays on that neighborhood. So, I mean, that's the type of road construction we're looking to do here. And once you get into that maintenance cycle, that's when you start having to do overlays. And, you know, we like to actually avoid overlays for a while because, again, that introduces asphalt over the concrete, which starts stealing into moisture, which affects the roadway itself and actually kind of accelerates that degrading of the road surface. And this is, it's kind of hard maybe to see in this photo, but this is Adams Street. And when you start seeing that type of cracking in Adams Street, there's a big logo in the middle. You shouldn't have done that.
It's a few years away from going back to being a gravel street.
Yeah.
When you see that alligator cracking like that, those will chip out, bust up, more water gets in. The rate of decline accelerates when you get to this level because of what's happening.
And I guess I'm not a policymaker, but I think from staff's perspective, what I would say is what we're recommending at this point, at least to council, is its total full depth replacement is when we do assessments. The maintenance cycle that we've been doing, and frankly that we'll continue to do, because full depth replacement is only one of the strategies. You want to put maintenance dollars in to lengthen the between when you have to do full depth replacements. Maintenance is an important part of that cycle. And so from staff's perspective, we're not recommending that we change how we do our maintenance cycle. Now, certainly that could change, but right now, and there are some communities, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, maintenance cycle, they do assessments.
You can. That's really painful when you get an assessment for asphalt replacement every 45 years. Yeah, if you have 15 years to pay your assessment, you would certainly expect the pavement to last at least 15 years. 50 years is not unreasonable. 40 to 50 years for this pavement to last is what you would expect. It's interesting, I don't like to talk about other cities that much, but we are literally at the very beginning stages of having conversation with the city of Adel, council meeting tomorrow night. They have gone through this process, had virtually every street paved. They started it. I've been in business 40 years. They started it before I got in business, and they're now thinking about starting it over again. And they want to go back and revisit their assessment policy to see if they want to do it the same way the next 50 years that they have the last 50. So, thank you. Hopefully it was informative. You guys have quite a challenge on your hands. Don't beat them up too bad. They're just trying to do the right thing. And if we can help, we'd be glad to help. And good luck.
Got some questions with PFM on the summary of the bonding.
Yeah.
If you want to pull that up. Scenario D, updated scenario D.
Yes.
Okay, we're looking at $1.40, but that doesn't tell me, how do I want to say this? We don't know how much you're going to pay on that amount. I got here like 3.5 million. Is that what it is, total debt?
Total debt service.
Okay, so that's 9 years. So in comparison, you're going down to, what's the other one? Scenario 2.
There's different links, yes.
Okay, it's $100,000 more.
There's an error in that table.
But what I'm getting at is your comparison, 9 years on your term on the first one, and the other one is 11 years. So that's not a true comparison of $1.22 to $1.40 on about the same project cost.
So a little bit is, I don't know why, I'd have to.
So if I wanted to have the full scenario on the first one, I need to know what 11 years is going to be on that scenario. Or $100,000, huh?
I think I glanced at that real quick before I came. I think what they were trying to do, and they're really good at this, by the way, is I think what they were trying to do is say that with no assessments, the levy would be $1.40. With scenario 1, it could drop to $1.20 or $1.22.
I get that.
Okay, and then what I think they did is they structured the debt in their model
They kept
to
it
maintain that
at
$1.20.
But what I'm getting at is tell me what 11 years is going to be on the top one instead of $1.40. Tell me what's going to be for 11 years. Then I can compare.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
and we can
can't
go back,
compare this way.
and we can go back to Suzanne and have her run some.
Well, what I'm
different
getting at
numbers.
is if I knew what that number was, then and if it's close to $1.22 or a long ways away, that makes a big difference on my part to say city's going to pay it all or we're going to assess.
Yeah.
I need to know what that number is.
And
I think what they modeled was to try to say, once you got it down to this level.
I get that, but what I'm trying to point out is before I'm going to go forward with any of this, I need to know what that $1.40 is going to be reduced to.
And we'll ask Suzanne to rerun number 2. I mean, one of the things about number 2 is the dollar amount.
Well, it's not
gonna be-
number 2. It's the top one, scenario D. You need to rerun.
No, we need to rerun number 2.
What's wrong with this?
It shouldn't be 11 years. We need to run it at
So,
9 years.
okay, so you run that to 9 years.
Can I make one quick comment as these people leave? I just want to say thank you for the discussion we had tonight. I looked at, and obviously assessments is not a happy topic, that we could have really a civil discussion tonight. I really appreciate that. And, sometimes we talk over or not with people. And I think tonight's discussion really was a good discussion. So thank you for coming. We need to
Okay,
rerun
so
it.
scenario two, you gotta give me 9 years on that.
We'll rerun, we'll have a
I
rerun
don't know
number
what that
two.
number,
Yep.
122 will change to.
Yep. Now, one of the issues is like scenario one, for example, we could make those all 9. The problem is your dollar amount on the levy is already dropping very
Yes.
quickly.
Yes.
And so it's not going to make any sense to pay more interest and even drop the levy more,
Right.
pay it off.
Right.
But the cautionary note, like I started out saying, is if we're going to do special assessments, my recommendation to council would be not to drop the levy, but to do more projects.
If you don't
And
do
so the
assessment,
question,
you're gonna be limited.
and so I think the question we really needed to get at is how many more projects can we do? Like Terry was saying, you could do scenario one, do 2 additional projects every 15 years. Or,
Right.
We did a scenario 1A, which was essentially scenario 1, we just cut the number in half.
Right.
So now you do scenario 1A, we can do 1 additional project every 15 years. Maybe those assessments become more palatable.
Right.
And as Jerry mentioned, the construction cost is just going to go
They're gonna go up.
exponentially up
Well,
You know, Mike, what
every 3 years.
Mike, what you just said is exactly what I encouraged our city council to do when I was the mayor. We went back historically and looked at how much debt service our community could afford to pay. And frankly, several years before I became mayor, they let it go down. And they continued, and the city showed for it. It looked terrible. And so what we did is we went back in history and said, I forget the numbers, let's say it was $2.10 a thousand is what historically we were able to levy, and we didn't go broke doing it. But the levy was down to like $1.40. And so we told our staff, bring us projects that keeps our general obligation debt levy at $2.10 or whatever the number was. And then at that time, we were not assessing everything. But if you focus on, what we tried to do is focus on what debt service levy are you comfortable with? Because you have an obligation to maintain your streets. And as you said, once you get it to that level, maintain it. And then if you pick up the balance with assessments, you can do more work.
And there'll be a 1.2 to make that I think is important right now is there's the revaluation that's occurring right now, countywide. That's going to hit the books in 2 years.
Yeah, it's a 1/123 value, so it'd be already 25.
Yeah. And I think there's some angst out there that, okay, well, the city will have this high levy and then just let the new values come on and now you're going to collect a lot more dollars. Historically, we've not had that in Carroll. When we had major revaluations, our levy rates dropped. And that, we focus, yes, we talk a lot about levy rate, but we also focus on what dollars we're actually collecting.
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Yeah.
Not to interrupt, I'm sorry, but so where's Carroll gonna come, the school, gonna come up with $150,000, right? School board's gonna pass a levy that kicks it back onto us. We start talking about those things.
Yep.
So, they gotta come up with the money somehow too. So this is all,
It's definitely
it's all
big
tax
discussion.
everywhere.
Yeah. Now, one thing with the school, if you think about it, it's not just City of Carroll taxpayers paying the school tax, but it's a larger school district that
Right.
extends.
I know, but if they pass a levy to cover that money and they, it's
Yep.
another, they put it in their next ISL or something and they're gonna jack at 1.5% or whatever, that comes to us.
The taxpayers, absolutely agree. I get
So
it.
you special assess the school and it gets everybody.
You're right, Brian.
Well, you guys have done a great job of managing, one of the better managed financially cities I've worked with. I'm not just saying that to compliment you, you've done a really nice job. So you have a lot of flexibility. And I think you're very prudent in taking a more global look at what you're about to get into.
Yeah.
Assessments are not easy, but if you get them started, they can be very fair and consistent and help you continue to maintain your streets in good order. But some of you aren't gonna be here to make the decision, so the next council's got their hands full. So anyway, hats off to the way you've managed the city and where you're at today. You are in good shape.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks, Cody.
Thank you. Let us know if we can help.
All right. Done?
Or do you have anything else on other aspects of that?
Yeah. With that, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Take a motion for it. Second. Motion and second. Go and vote, please.
Seaman. Haley.
Yes.
Dirk.
Yes.
Fleishman.
Yes.
Cox. Pace.
Yes.
We are adjourned.